I never expected that I'd be standing here today, at the edge of my father's funeral, about to make one of the most difficult decisions of my life. It all started a few months before. My name is Emily, and I'm in my early 30s now, but the pain and complexity of family dynamics have been something I've struggled with for as long as I can remember. Growing up, my relationship with my parents was always fraught. My mother, Carol, had remarried a few years ago to someone I could barely stand, an arrogant man who seemed to have nothing in common with any of us. My father, on the other hand, had always been the calm anchor in my life. He wasn't perfect, but he was the one person I could always count on. He was there for me when I needed advice or a shoulder to lean on, even when I was at odds with my mother. After his passing, I thought that maybe, just maybe, the family would come together. But that's not how things played out. The moment my father passed away, things started to unravel. My mother, who had never been particularly sentimental about material things, suddenly became obsessed with clearing out his belongings. It was as though she was eager to erase him from the house, not even a week after his death. The family home, where my father had spent decades building memories, felt empty, as though he had never existed. I knew something wasn't right, but I was too caught up in my grief to confront her. A part of me wanted to believe that maybe it was just her way of coping. Perhaps she was just too eager to move on. But it didn't stop there. One evening, I came home to find my mother had sold off my father's car. It was the one thing he had kept from his younger days, and she had just given it away without even telling me. When I asked her why, she shrugged, her cold eyes not even meeting mine. She justified it by saying she needed the money for my sister, Nora, who had recently gone through a painful divorce. "Nora deserves it," she had said, her voice dismissive, like I should understand. "She needs it more than we do right now." I stood there, stunned, my heart sinking. It wasn't about the money, it was about the principle. I didn't even get the chance to speak to my father about it, and now, just like that, his memory was being erased from the home. His things weren't just items to be sold, they were pieces of him. The loss hit me hard, but I still stayed quiet. There was too much going on, too much grief, too much anger. But I couldn't help but feel like I was losing something far more precious than just objects. I was losing the connection to the man who had been my father. Days went by, and it felt like I was holding on to the last remnants of him. I still had his journals, his old photographs, and the memories of the stories he'd told me. But as I looked around the house, all I could see were empty spaces where he used to be. A few days later, things got worse. My mother called me to tell me that she had moved in her new husband, Peter, and his children. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. I had always hoped that once my father passed away, things would settle, that she would give me the time I needed to grieve. But instead, it felt like she was rushing ahead, clearing out the space and filling it with people who had no connection to the life we had shared with my father. I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't ready to confront her. I wasn't even sure how to feel about it. But when I visited the house, it was clear that I wasn't welcome anymore. Not because they weren't nice people, but because it felt like a complete violation of the life I had known. It was as if my father had never existed in that space, and everything was being replaced, everything that meant something to me. That was when I started to notice the subtle shifts in the way my mother treated me. She was dismissive, cold even. Every time I tried to bring up my father's memory or talk about how things had changed since he died, she would brush it off as though it didn't matter. As though I didn't matter. One evening, I made the decision to confront her. I couldn't keep holding it in, couldn't let myself be passive anymore. It wasn't just about the car or the furniture. It was about the way I felt completely displaced, as though I had no place in the family anymore. When I brought it up, my mother's response was sharp. "Emily, you don't understand. I'm just trying to move forward," she said, her voice cutting through me like a knife. "Move forward?" I asked, trying to control the tears that were threatening to spill. "By selling Dad's things and letting his memory fade like it never mattered?" She didn't reply, and for the first time I felt a chasm open up between us, one that seemed impossible to close. She had already made her decision, and it was clear that I wasn't part of it. Later that night, she called me. My heart skipped a beat as I picked up the phone, but it wasn't what I had expected. She wasn't calling to apologize or explain herself. Instead, she asked about some missing documents she needed to find. It was almost as though she had forgotten everything that had happened earlier that evening. In that moment, something inside me snapped. How could she be so oblivious to the emotional turmoil she was putting me through? How could she act as though nothing had changed, as though my father's memory meant nothing? The pain was too much to bear, and a decision that had been building up inside me for months now felt like the only option. I couldn't keep going on like this, pretending everything was fine. I couldn't keep letting my mother make all the decisions about my father's legacy, about my place in this family. I needed to protect myself, even if it meant cutting ties completely. The phone call was like a punch to the gut. My mother, casual as ever, asking for those missing documents. It was the last straw. I could feel my patience slipping through my fingers, and yet I still couldn't bring myself to hang up. Something in me wanted to hold on to the hope that things would get better, that one day she'd see how much it hurt to watch her so easily forget about my father, about our life together. But that night, as I sat alone in my room, the weight of everything hit me all at once. It wasn't just the car or the furniture, it wasn't even just about my father. It was the years of silence between us, the years of pretending like everything was okay while the distance between us grew wider, until one day I woke up and realized I didn't recognize her anymore. I wasn't just grieving the loss of my father. I was grieving the loss of my family, of the connection I used to have with my mother, the woman who once held me when I was sick, the woman who taught me how to bake cookies, the woman who had always been there. She was gone, and in her place was someone else. Someone who cared more about moving on, about fixing her life, than she cared about the damage she was leaving behind. That night, I stared at the phone, my mind running through every conversation I'd had with her over the past few weeks. Each one had been a reminder of how little I mattered. My grief didn't matter to her. My anger didn't matter to her. Nothing I felt mattered. I stayed up late that night, scrolling through old photos of my father. I found one of the two of us, his arm around my shoulders, smiling at the camera. I remembered how safe I felt in his presence, how his voice always calmed my nerves when everything seemed to be falling apart. And then I thought about my mother, how she had slowly erased him from our lives. At that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't stay in this house any longer. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I couldn't let my mother walk all over me like this. I didn't care about the house anymore, or about the inheritance. I didn't care about any of it. What I cared about was my own peace, my own ability to move forward in a way that didn't include her, or the toxic relationship we'd developed over the years. The next day, I packed my things. The house I had grown up in suddenly felt too small, too suffocating. I had to leave, even if it meant cutting ties for good. As I folded the last of my clothes and stuffed them into boxes, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was like I was shedding a layer of skin, leaving behind the weight of all these years of resentment and disappointment. But the hardest part wasn't packing. It was saying goodbye. I didn't even know if my mother would care that I was leaving. We hadn't spoken in days. She had been too busy with her new life, too busy with her new husband and his kids to notice. But I had to say something, had to at least try. So I found her sitting in the kitchen, sipping her coffee like she didn't have a care in the world. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice flat. She didn't even look up at first. When she did, it was like she was hearing it for the first time. Her eyes narrowed, but there was no surprise there, no sadness, just indifference. "You're what?" she asked, as if I'd just told her I was going to the store. "I'm leaving," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending everything's okay when you've made it clear that it's not." She sighed, putting her coffee cup down with a clink. "Emily, don't be dramatic. It's just a house. We'll get by. You'll get by," I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her everything I had been holding in for years, but instead, I just shook my head. "I'm not being dramatic, Mom," I said, my voice breaking despite myself. "You sold Dad's things without telling me. You kicked me out of our home, and now you're acting like none of this matters." "Well, it matters to me. I'm done pretending it doesn't." She stood up, her face hardening. "You don't get it, do you? I've got my own life to live." I've been living in your father's shadow for too long, and now I'm finally free. If you can't understand that, then I don't know what else to say." My stomach twisted. I was numb, but the words cut deeper than I ever thought possible. "You're free!" Free from what exactly? Free from being a mother? Free from me? Free from everything that mattered to you before? "I'm just trying to live, Emily. I'm just trying to move on," she said, her voice cold. I stared at her for a long moment, feeling the last threads of connection snap between us. In that instant, I realized that I didn't know this woman anymore. My mother was gone. What stood before me now was a stranger, someone who cared more about her own happiness than the consequences of her actions. "I can't do this," I said, the tears I had been holding back finally spilling over. "I'm leaving. I don't know when or if I'll come back, but I need to take care of myself for once." I turned and walked away before she could say anything else. I didn't need to hear any more excuses, any more dismissals. The decision had been made. It was time to move on, even if it meant leaving my mother behind. I didn't look back when I left the house that day, even though everything in me screamed to. There was a strange peace in knowing that I had finally made a decision for myself, even if it was a painful one. But as I stepped into the unknown, a weight settled over me. I didn't have a plan for what came next. I didn't know where I would go, how I would rebuild, or if I could ever get over the feeling of betrayal that was now gnawing at my heart. The first few days after leaving felt like I was floating in some weird in-between state. I stayed with a friend for a while, someone who had always been supportive even when things at home were falling apart. But every night I lay awake, my mind racing. I couldn't stop thinking about my father. He had been gone for months, yet his absence still haunted me, and now his memory seemed like the only thing I had left. The pain of losing him had never fully sunk in until now. My mother had done everything she could to bury it. She had replaced him with her new life, her new family, and now there was nothing left to remind me of the man who had once been my rock. I kept trying to hold on to fragments of him, his voice, his laugh, his wisdom. But the more I tried, the more it felt like he was slipping through my fingers. It wasn't just the loss of my father that stung anymore. It was the realization that I had lost my mother too. For years I had tried to understand her, to get her to see me, but now I understood. She wasn't the woman I thought she was. She hadn't been that woman for a long time. I spent the next few weeks bouncing between friends' places, trying to piece together the shattered remnants of my life. I knew I had to get back on my feet, but it was hard to focus on anything when my mind kept drifting back to what had happened. How could she do this? How could she throw away everything, including me, just for the sake of her own convenience? I started picking up work again, doing freelance graphic design for small businesses. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cover the basics: rent, food, bills. Slowly, I began to carve out a routine, a sense of normalcy that didn't involve the constant stress of my family. But every time I walked past a store that reminded me of my father, or when I saw an old picture of him on the street, my chest tightened. I would stop and stare for a moment, letting the memories flood me before pushing them away, as if somehow I could outrun the pain. Then, one day, about a month after I left, my phone rang. I saw my mother's name flash across the screen, and my stomach dropped. I had been avoiding her calls, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to handle the conversation. I didn't know how to face her, knowing what I now knew. But this time I answered. "Emily." Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if she wasn't sure how to start. "I've been thinking about everything." I didn't say anything right away. I didn't know what to say. For the first time in a long while, my mother sounded like she might actually be thinking about something other than herself. "I know things have been difficult between us," she continued, "and I realized that I hurt you. I didn't mean to. I was overwhelmed, and I didn't know how to deal with it." I let her words hang in the air for a moment. There was a part of me that wanted to believe her. There was a part of me that wanted to forgive her, to pretend like everything could go back to how it was before all of this started. But another part of me, the part that had been left behind and ignored for so long, knew better. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said quietly, my voice trembling despite myself. "You don't get to just erase Dad and think that everything is okay. I know I've made mistakes, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I've been selfish and I'm sorry. I can't take back what I did, but I want to make things right between us. I want to be your mother again. The words hit me harder than I expected. I felt the anger surge up in me, followed by a sharp pang of sadness. I wanted to believe her, I really did. I wanted to believe that everything could go back to how it was. But it wasn't that simple. I wasn't sure if it was even possible anymore. I'm not sure what to say, Mom, I replied. I don't know if I can just forget everything. It's not that easy. I understand, she said softly. I just want you to know that I'm here. If you're ready to talk, to try again, I'll be here. The conversation ended with a silence that lingered long after I hung up. It was clear to me now that this wasn't something I could fix overnight. I couldn't just walk back into her life and pretend like none of this had happened. The rift between us was too deep, too wide, and no matter how much she apologized, it wouldn't change the fact that she had made choices that had forever altered our relationship. But even in that silence, a small part of me wondered if this was the beginning of something new. Maybe, someday, we could rebuild what had been broken. But for now, I wasn't ready to try. I needed time. Time to heal. Time to figure out who I was now that everything I thought I knew had been shattered. As the weeks passed, I threw myself into work. I started picking up bigger projects, working with companies that actually paid well enough to cover more than just the basics. I started making new friends, people who didn't know me as the daughter of a broken family, but as someone who had their own story to tell. Slowly, I began to piece my life back together, one step at a time. But no matter how much I tried to move forward, I couldn't escape the feeling that something was missing. I had lost my family, and in the process, I had lost myself. The road ahead was long, and I didn't know where it would take me. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back to the way things were. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The days blended together, each one feeling like a mirror image of the last. I didn't know if I was healing or just getting used to the pain. My routine had become predictable, but the heaviness in my chest never quite left. I worked, I ate, I slept, but there was always that nagging thought in the back of my mind. What would happen if I actually confronted my mother again? Would it change anything? Would it make me feel better? Or would it just reopen the wounds that had barely started to heal? One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone. It was late, and I'd just finished another round of emails for work. My eyes were tired, my brain fried, but I couldn't sleep. The silence in my apartment was suffocating. I picked up my phone and stared at it, my thumb hovering over the screen. I hadn't heard from my mother in weeks, not since that phone call where she said she wanted to try again. She had said the words I needed to hear, but something in me still didn't believe it. I didn't know if I ever would. I had told myself I wasn't ready, that I needed time, and I did. But the longer I went without hearing from her, the more that silence weighed on me. Maybe she had given up on me. Maybe she hadn't. I couldn't know until I reached out. I took a deep breath and pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, 3 times before she picked up. Emily? Her voice sounded small and tentative, as though she hadn't been sure I'd actually call. Hi, Mom, I said, my voice soft but steady. I had no idea what I was expecting, no idea what to say. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. I hadn't said them in so long. Hi, she replied, almost whispering. I wasn't sure if you were ready to talk again. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. The honesty felt like a relief. But I've been thinking about it, a lot. I'm glad to hear that. She paused, and I could almost hear the uncertainty in her words. I know things have been difficult. I don't expect everything to be fixed right away, Emily. I just want to have a chance to make things right, if you'll let me. I closed my eyes, my mind swirling with all the memories of what had happened, the betrayal, the anger, the hurt. But alongside all that, there was a faint, stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. I don't know what that looks like, I said honestly. I don't know if I can just go back to how things were before. I don't think I want to. I don't expect you to, she responded, her voice tight with emotion. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I know I've failed you, and I can't undo what I did, but I can try to be better, if you'll give me a chance. I stayed quiet for a long time, thinking about everything I'd been through in the past few months. The emptiness I'd felt after my father's death, the feeling of abandonment as my mother slowly replaced him with a new life that I didn't recognize, the pain of watching her erase all the memories, all the love that we had once shared as a family. And yet, despite all of that, a small part of me, maybe the last part of me that still clung to hope, wanted to believe that something could come from this conversation, that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what had been lost. Not in the same way, not in a perfect way, but in a new way. A way that allowed both of us to heal and move forward. I don't know if I can forgive you, Mom, I said, my voice breaking despite myself. But I don't want to keep living like this. I don't want to keep feeling like I'm losing everything. I understand, she said quietly. And I don't want you to feel like that. I just want to be part of your life again, even if it's small, even if we have to start slow. The silence that followed was heavy, but it didn't feel quite as suffocating as before. It felt like something had shifted, something that couldn't be fixed in one conversation. But that was a start. I'm not sure what this is going to look like, Mom, I said finally, but I'm willing to try. If you really mean it, if you really want to be a part of my life again. I do, Emily, she said, the sincerity in her voice clear. I do. That was the first time in a long while that I felt like maybe, just maybe, things could be okay. Not perfect, but okay. And maybe that was enough. We agreed to take things slow. There would be no sudden fixes, no pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. But for the first time in months, there was a spark of possibility, a glimmer of hope that we could work through our issues one step at a time. I didn't know what the future held or how things would turn out, but I was willing to try. For the first time, I felt like I had control over my own life again. The days that followed that conversation felt like a cautious dance. Each step forward was tentative, slow, as though neither of us fully trusted the ground beneath our feet. I didn't expect miracles, and I don't think she did either. But something had shifted between us, just enough to make it possible to start rebuilding, even if it was one small brick at a time. I kept my distance, not because I didn't want to try, but because I didn't know what else to do. I needed time to process, to understand what kind of relationship I could have with her after everything that had happened. Could I ever trust her again? Could I ever stop feeling like I had been left behind, abandoned for the sake of her new life? The first few weeks were a mix of awkward silences and strained conversations. We'd meet up for coffee every once in a while, each of us treading carefully around old wounds. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when I felt the sting of everything that had been lost. Moments when I would catch myself thinking about how much had changed, how different everything felt, and the pain of not knowing how to fill that empty space. But something unexpected happened during one of those coffee meetings. I was sitting across from my mother, watching her sip her latte, when she suddenly looked up at me with a softness in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. It was like a piece of her that had been buried for years was finally breaking free. I've been thinking about your father a lot lately, she said, her voice low, almost hesitant. I never realized how much of him I had pushed away, how much of him I had forgotten in order to move on. And I can see now how much that hurt you, how much I hurt you. I didn't know how to respond. For so long I had wanted her to acknowledge it, to say those words. But now that she had, I wasn't sure what to do with them. I wasn't sure if it made everything okay or if it just made the wounds more raw. It wasn't just about your dad, though, I said quietly, my fingers tracing the edge of my cup. It was about me, too. It was about how you made me feel like I didn't matter, like I was just something you could leave behind when you didn't need me anymore. Her face softened even more, and I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. I didn't mean to make you feel that way, she whispered. I was just trying to hold on to something, and I didn't realize that in doing so, I was losing the most important thing, the relationship with my own daughter. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to accept it, to let her words heal some of the damage, but another part of me was still holding on to my anger, my sadness. I had every right to be angry, every right to feel the pain of being pushed aside. But what good would it do to keep holding on to all of it? "I'm not sure how to forgive you, Mom," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can forget everything, but I'm trying. I'm trying to find a way to heal." "I know," she replied softly, her hand reaching across the table to touch mine. "And I'll be here, Emily. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here, no matter how long it takes." I nodded, not trusting my voice to speak. We didn't need any more words after that. It was enough to know that, even though things weren't perfect, there was a chance. There was a possibility of something better, even if it was still a long way off. Over the next few months, things between us started to change, little by little. There was no grand gesture, no sudden moment of reconciliation where everything magically fell into place. But there were moments of connection, simple moments where we would laugh over an old memory or share a quiet conversation. Those small moments began to add up, and slowly I started to feel like I wasn't just her daughter again. I was me, too. I was more than just the pain of the past. I was someone who could stand on my own, and if I ever chose to open the door to my mother again, it would be because I was ready, not because I had to. I didn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't. But I started to let go of the bitterness, the anger that had kept me chained to a past that I couldn't change. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the hurt or pretending nothing happened. It was about giving myself the freedom to move forward without carrying the weight of the past on my shoulders. The phone call from my mother that had once filled me with dread now felt like a reminder that, even in the most fractured relationships, there could be healing. It wasn't easy and it wasn't fast, but it was possible. I didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own life again. No more waiting for others to make things right. No more putting myself last. I was putting myself first. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most important step toward healing. Story 2. I am a 39-year-old man who has been married to my 36-year-old wife for 15 years. Our kid is 13 years old. My family is rather large. There are my 58-year-old mother, my 62-year-old father, my 30-year-old sister, and my 22-year-old youngest brother. Something unexpected occurred last year. In our bedroom, I discovered my wife sobbing. I questioned her about what was wrong. She informed me of her pregnancy. I told her it was fantastic news and was ecstatic. However, she appeared rather distressed and simply left the room, which I found somewhat odd. At about the same time, I saw that she was using her phone a lot more than normal because of the ongoing COVID crisis. Since no one else could come over to help, I was the only one caring for Mom and doing all the chores. She eventually gave birth to our daughter, who is really cute and resembles her mother exactly. Let's fast forward to the recent past. My younger brother began to visit frequently, almost every day. Since he is, after all, my younger brother, I first didn't give it much thought. However, I began to notice something strange when we all traveled to spend a few weeks with my parents. My wife was behaving more like my brother than was reasonable. I have a lot on my plate personally. I am the primary provider for my parents and our family. I work as an investment banker and manage a few stores for my parents. In addition, we rent out a number of our homes. Yes, I have a lot going on, but while I was at home, I couldn't help but observe how much time my brother and wife were spending together. She used to be closer to my sister than anybody else, so I found this strange. In addition to the strange emotions I was receiving from my brother and wife, I also noticed that my sister was spending more time with me than normal. She seemed to be attempting to convey something significant to me, but each time I questioned her about it, she would dismiss it and claim that everything was okay. She said there was nothing to be concerned about. Then, without warning, my dad wants to take me fishing alone, individually. Sure, why not? I ask. He begins telling us about his own fishing adventures and recollections of spending time with his own father at the same location while we are out fishing and relaxing. I mean, that was pleasant. In addition, Dad begins to show me how pleased he is of me, and what a wonderful kid I am. However, it was evident to me that he had more to say. He eventually reaches the point where he expresses his sadness for my little brother. As it happens, my brother doesn't actually have many objectives. He smokes much, drinks too much, and isn't working. My mom always had a soft place for my brother, but my dad and he were never really close. As we're finishing up, suddenly my dad tells that he must go somewhere. He gives me this small piece of paper with instructions to read it when he leaves, along with the fishing equipment. When I open this document, my entire world suddenly changes. The results of the DNA test hit me like a ton of bricks. My daughter's biological father is not me. That was not enough for me to sit with. Everyone was already gathering at our family home when I hurried back. It was like entering a hurricane. When I confronted my brother and wife, they both acknowledged everything, expressed regret, and acknowledged that it was all a huge error. It became out that they had feelings for one another and that this had been going on for over a year. In an attempt to comfort me, my wife said she was sorry for what had happened and would always be sorry. She insisted that I was the ideal father and husband, but wow, it was a lot to hear. It simply didn't improve anything. Here's the dirt then. I'm this person who's constantly looking for a job, right? I'm always buzzing from work. I'm barely at home because of it. Don't get it wrong, though. Not all of me was Mia. Twice a year, I made sure we took those amazing vacations. And once or twice a month, those adorable date nights. Additionally, we consistently maintained a bustling romance department. I was that guy all the time, dropping in and saying, "Hey, how are you?" I was hoping that if something was bothering her, she would open up. My sister suddenly enters the picture and says, "I knew something was off, but I just couldn't say it." Can you imagine the sensation of that? Similar to a gut punch. But hold on, it gets more bizarre. In an attempt to teach me acceptance, my mother chooses to join the whole scene, baby in tow. She is everything. My child has been bonded to this new baby, so let's just go on and celebrate. Which, surprise, is the love kid of my brother and wife. By claiming that I'm the big bro, she is pleading for pardon. I also got to lead by example. My mouth fell to the ground. That's how my own family plays me. I simply let it out. Told my wife directly, I will not engage in these games. Vying for your focus. Divorce? Yes, that is now on the table. And my brother, whom I've always supported. As it happens, it was him who stabbed me. I left them to deal with the disaster they created and went away. Since I bounced, my phone has been exploding constantly. My dad calls me, attempting to be discreetly helpful because he is in the middle of my relationship with my mother. Carrying this guilt, he claims to have been a bad father, and reveals that my mother was aware of the affair all along, but chose to remain silent. Forget it, I said. Perhaps I should just cut myself off from this so-called family if this is how things are going to be. Once the divorce has been finalized, I haven't even had a chance to mention this spectacle to her family. In the meantime, my ex-boyfriend is always on my phone, making constant calls and sending a ton of texts. My son is really missing me in the midst of all of this. My entire universe seems to have been completely upended, and all I'm doing is attempting to determine which way is up. Here's the thing then. My brother, since everything went wrong. Yes, he hasn't even made an effort to get in touch. He didn't say a word, but my sister did come forward and apologize. "I know I should have been there for you, but I simply couldn't find the guts," she said. "I've always thought of you as the superhero, and I'm really honored to have you as my brother. I was struck by it, you know? However, I must admit that I haven't had the energy to respond to her, or anybody else for that matter. Get this now." My mother suddenly makes the decision to call me. She starts talking about how everyone makes mistakes occasionally, and then goes on to say that if I just choose to forgive and move on, our family may miraculously become happy again. She then drops the shocking, claiming that my children require a father figure. And guess who's waiting in the wings if I can't be that guy? My sibling. Yes, as if that would improve the situation in any way. She also made an attempt to scare me by threatening to take away my chances of keeping my children if she supported me in court. That simply infuriated me. I pressed the block button on her more quickly than you can imagine. Betrayal. Since then, I have not spoken to any of them. Going into this entire divorce mess now is going to be very expensive. But now I'm saying, bring it on. It's been difficult to sleep, and I've kept all of this a secret from almost everyone else. Don't think about it. Eating. What is that? I feel like I've lost everything that made life worthwhile, and I'm simply going through the motions. My spouse, my children, and my family, even my pride. Everything has simply disappeared into thin air. It has been a nightmare of a week. I'm unable to wake up, leaving me unsure of what I should do next. What's the purpose, really, without all that? Do you know? Edit. I thus spoke with a lawyer regarding the divorce process. The problem is that I need to begin the filing procedure immediately. According to the lawyer, I will need to pay spousal support, which is essentially money to support our kid and my soon-to-be ex-wife. Yes. I still adore her despite the fact that she is not biologically mine. The worst part is that, given the circumstances, it will be difficult to obtain primary custody for her, even if she is officially my daughter. Not by DNA, though. Indeed, the entire divorce process will not be easy or inexpensive. However, it appears that I will have to pay around $900 each month for them. Furthermore, it appears that I may wind up with shared custody of my kid after things are divided. That's around 50% time spent with him. In addition, I'll have to split half of our assets. Oh, and the DNA test I told you about. I apologize. I intended it to be a paternity test between my brother and daughter. According to the data, there is a 99% possibility that my brother is the father. Can you believe it, really? When my wife and I initially started dating, he was just 7 years old. Describe a chaotic scene. Here is a little report on my circumstances. As time passed, I was kind of clinging to the notion that perhaps, just possibly, things might begin to appear less bleak. But was I mistaken? It seems as though the world decided to intensify the drama for those who haven't been following my soap opera after observing my predicament. To get the whole story, you might want to go back and read my previous post. To cut a long tale short, I left our home after learning of the entire issue, organized my finances, spoke with some legal experts, and started the process of getting a divorce from this whole ordeal. On Friday of this past week, the divorce papers suddenly appeared in my possession. Then my wife unexpectedly arrives at my house. She tries to apologize for the entire disaster she created and pulls the "let's think about our son" card during our lengthy conversation. Here's the problem, though. I've made up my mind. I'm finished. I obtain this and give her the divorce papers. As though it would make me forget everything and end the divorce, she attempts to change the subject and woo me. Really, comma. I told her to get out of there because I couldn't stand it. But hold on, there's more. Normally away having a great time in the Netherlands, my sister chose to return for what was meant to be a relaxing holiday. Well, this whole circus quickly threw that strategy out the window. She didn't mince words. We ended up having a heart-to-heart over the phone after she departed, where I laid into my parents and wife before she completed her vacation and went home. Being caught up in this whole mess caused her to feel somewhat conflicted. It seems that my mother had been pleading with her to keep the information from me. I was so worried about how I would react to the news. It turns out that my mom kept things quiet in part because of my younger brother. Though it didn't exactly make me feel better about the mess I'm in, the conversation with my sister did provide some clarity. Indeed, I have seen remarks circulating that suggest my life is too crazy to be real. To be honest, I hope that was all a horrible dream. Nope, it's all occurring, and I feel as like I'm witnessing the disintegration of my reality. It feels like everything I've ever cared about is slipping away from me. If there is a good side, it is this one. Recently, I was able to spend some time with my kid. We visited this gambling area. For a few hours. That is the only thing that is popular here. It resembled a brief reprieve from the mayhem. He and I are going on some virtual excursions alone. I therefore had a genuine conversation with my brother, correct? He breaks the news to me that our mom has been going through a really difficult time, crying almost every day. Then there's my wife and the entire thing. I suppose the ex-wife is just adrift in this sea of uncertainty, completely unclear of what to do next. She seems to be unable to find her way out of the difficult situation she finds herself in. But hold on, there's more. It turns out that my younger brother's lack of responsibility is largely to blame for the predicament we're in. The man would rather get wasted and drown in alcohol than deal with any actual obligations. So far, my sister and I have had enough. We both resolved to put the whole family turmoil behind us since we've had enough. We're even avoiding any controversy surrounding inheritance because, really, who wants that sort of hassle? This is when things take a step further. I'm really considering severing all ties with the family. I'm considering simply moving to another nation and starting again. Through all of this, my sister, bless her, has been a pillar of support, even offering to help me set up if I decide to go to the Netherlands. And the more I consider it, the more I believe that's my direction. After a little while, I began the entire divorce procedure a year ago. It hasn't been easy. Let me tell you, Dot. The days seem to go on forever, and I get really depressed every time I let my thoughts to return to the mess. I can't remember how many times I've been ill because I've been under so much stress, as well as my health. Yes, my blood pressure and blood sugar levels are all over the place, and it's not going well. Then, without warning, my father calls me Dot. There is some very unpleasant news for him. My mother suffered a severe stroke. She passed out in the middle of her meal, and now she lies in a hospital bed with a quite dire prognosis. In the middle of all commotion, the doctors advise us to keep her in our prayers, but they are not very optimistic. My ex-wife has been taking charge of the hospital's operations. My younger brother occasionally displays his face for a few hours before vanishing. Together, my dad, kids, and I are attempting to weather this storm. Dad is urging me to come visit, essentially anticipating the worst. My sister and I had a heart-to-heart about the whole thing, and she is equally conflicted as I am. A part of me is considering seeing my mother. However, a significant portion of me is just, I'm not sure, apprehensive. Man, it's a disaster. It's like attempting to solve a jigsaw with half the parts missing while you're trying to decide what to do next. This is the offer. The lady who is my mother is still my mother at the end of the day. However, it's a major deal, yet she made the decision to abandon me. She seemed to have considered every option for helping me. I just moved the opposite direction to stand with my wife after shrugging. The fact that my wife ended up with my brother isn't what really irritates me. Yes, it hurts like hell, but what hurts the most is the betrayal of my own physical and emotional integrity. Not a single person bothered to let me know what was going on, even though the entire team knew. By supporting my brother and thus implying that I would be left alone if I made a big deal out of it, my mother truly stole the cake. A plot twist now. Suddenly my mom wants to visit me while she's in the hospital. I quote, am a complete mess about it, to be quite honest. My mind is in such a bad place that I'm considering ending my life. I've tried opening up to therapists in the hopes of receiving some insightful advice, but it seems like they're only there to nod and accept my money without providing any genuine assistance. My family have been circling the hospital visits to spice up this drama. Additionally, news of my wife's brief adventure spreads. Seeing dominoes fall is analogous to this. I always thought my favorite uncle was level-headed, but now he loses it all. Not only that, but he attacks her and my brother verbally while they are in the hospital. My adolescent had to take over and play the peacekeeper since it was that horrible, and it worked. Unbelievably. Thus, I find myself enmeshed in this whole chaos. I've been discussing my ideas with my friends in an attempt to get perspective. All of them are essentially singing the same song. Complete the divorce, move, and even start again in another nation. Make a fresh start. Try to put together what appears to be happiness with a new person. I quote, am simply trying to live day by day, but there's a lot to consider. This is where I am now. Making any type of planning is like attempting to capture smoke with my bare hands, and I feel like I'm floating in this strange vacuum. It simply isn't taking place. You know, I had this meeting with my lawyer to attempt to figure out what I may do next. He explains to me that, in theory, I might still receive my share of the estate even if my mother never got around to drafting a will. That is, assuming I don't give up on it or if she doesn't decide to remove me from the situation completely. Nothing like that has occurred as of yet. Here, quote, the worst part, though. At this moment, my family is still holding on to the money from the inheritance. I just no longer find any significance in it. Making sure my son is okay is all that is on my mind and all that I truly care about. I want so badly to simply grab him and get away from this family disaster. Look for a place where we can relax and feel secure. I'm now attempting to ensure my son has a bright future by becoming involved in the paternity dispute. It looks like it will be much more of a hardship than the divorce. And that's saying something, I tell you. It seems that in many jurisdictions, the entire affair scenario doesn't truly tilt the scales. And I'm in a bit of a bind because my wife has been the one at home with our child. However, I've discovered a small strategy. It may really work in my advantage if I give up any inheritance claims. I might even avoid the whole spousal support issue. However, that's a big if, and depends on us being able to work together. In addition, I have the choice to complain about my brother for destroying my marriage. In addition, my children are still underage. It could be effective to impose a restraining order on my brother and wife, particularly considering I'm from a place where the entire drug and booze thing doesn't sit well. Indeed, a ray of optimism is seen through this storm cloud. But gosh, I've been completely caught off guard by my mom's health taking a serious turn for the worse. It's amazing how a few weeks can completely upend your existence and take you to the brink of despair. My son is the one thing that has kept me rooted during this entire catastrophe. He helps me navigate even the darkest nights like a beacon of light. The one thing that makes me realize that I must continue to push through this mess. Throwing yourself into the deep end, then. My mother's illness was far worse than everyone had anticipated. Even with all the animosity, I couldn't ignore her. You know, it was one of those times when you could just turn up and forget about the past. So I did. I saw her like that. All frail and wired up to machines. When I went to the hospital, I was affected by it. It served as a gut-punch reminder that despite everything, there is still a familial bond that is difficult to cut off. I felt compelled to handle this difficult problem. I talked with Taylor. I made an effort to explain the entire dress code. Our topic is black tuxedos. Very James Bond. And perhaps, just possibly, I became a little too intense. I'm not proud of what I said in the end. For example, asking him to be more manly and implying that his typical mannerisms would make people laugh. Being the champion that he is, Taylor first just shrugged it off and joked about wearing a white dress. However, following our conversation, he made the decision to decline the wedding. I can't help but feel like I made a mistake, even though he has been calm about it and assured me there are no hard feelings. Despite his tendency to follow his own path, Taylor has been my ride or die for years, and I cherish our relationship much. Our group chat is currently exploding with questions from my family over Taylor's decision to skip the wedding, and our group of friends has been tense ever since he declined the invitation. I'm now wondering if I was too severe or if I was too preoccupied with organizing the wedding to keep in mind what matters most. Did I make a huge mistake? Am I the villain in this situation? It gets considerably messier from here. My wife, or maybe more accurately, my soon-to-be ex-wife, was playing the obedient daughter-in-law in the hospital. Watching her move across the room as if nothing had occurred was unreal. Our interactions like traversing a minefield. In the middle of this, we were both carefully avoiding the enormous elephant in the room. With the exception of his fleeting appearances in the hospital, my brother, who has been MIA, ultimately chooses to have a heart-to-heart. To put it mildly, it was embarrassing. He's opening up, claiming he's adrift without his older brother's supervision and expressing regret for the mayhem he caused. There was a part of me that wanted to ignore him. However, another part of him, possibly the one that recalled all the happy days before everything went wrong, could not just close the door. My sister has been my pillar of support during all of this. She has been taking care of our parents, managing the logistics, and keeping me from going crazy. In order to help mend things, or at least get us to a point where we can be in the same room without it turning into World War III, she has even begun to discuss scheduling some family therapy sessions. The legal struggle has been a whole other animal. As if we were planning a military takeover, my lawyer has been on rapid dial. We're juggling everything: divorce, custody, inheritance, you name it. The bright side: we may have discovered a weakness that may help me win the custody dispute, considering my brother and wife's entire issue. Even if it's unlikely, I'll take what I can get for now. The worst part is about to come. Things became more convoluted just when I believed they couldn't get any more complicated. Bless his heart, my kid has been handling all of this rather well. However, it's obvious that it's affecting him. His grades have plummeted, and he has been misbehaving and fighting at school. In addition to everything else, I'm attempting to be super dad by guiding him through this difficult time without losing who he is. Then there's my wife and the entire thing, or to be more specific, she has been giving out conflicting messages, acting as though we are sworn enemies one moment, then begging for another opportunity the next. I wish I could get off this roller coaster. But I've been making an effort to be at least somewhat cordial for the benefit of our children. What is the strategy going forward, then? To be honest, You have to take things one day at a time. Providing my youngster with a stable atmosphere and letting him know he's not alone are my top priorities. Even though the divorce is still on schedule, I'm prepared for the effect, even though it will be a difficult journey. When it comes to family dynamics, it's like attempting to negotiate a minefield while wearing a blindfold. A great deal of betrayal and hurt are present. However, there is also a ray of optimism that we might be able to salvage something from this debris. Not only will it not be quick, but it will also not be simple. However, I'm beginning to believe that there could be a glimmer of hope at the end of this really bleak tunnel. I quote, "We've been making an effort to concentrate on the good things, the epiphanies, the minor triumphs, and the lessons this entire experience has taught me in the interim." In addition to serving as a reminder of what matters most in life, it has, rather surprisingly, strengthened my bonds with other family members. Let's simply say that it has helped me identify my true dependability. That quote, it, the most recent chapter in my life's continuous story. There have been several detours along the way, ups and downs, but I'm developing, learning, and most importantly, surviving through it all. Hopefully, the following chapter will be a bit less dramatic. Who am I kidding, though? If all goes well, I should have enough material for a best-selling book by the end of this. Story 3. I'm a man 47. My lovely girlfriend and I are getting married. 34-4.5-year-old girls in less than a week. My second engagement is this one. I nearly married my ex-girlfriend 11 years ago. 38, woman. We had been dating for about a decade, and she was my high school sweetheart. We even shared a home for 5 years, of course. I was therefore prepared to be married, of course. I guess I wasn't the only one who was taken aback. She seemed to be too. When I told my family that we were engaged, they were thrilled since they had a good opinion of my ex. The shock was increased, though, when my ex ended up having a sexual experience with my 34-year-old brother only one day before the wedding. I complied with my ex's request that I stay at a motel the night before the wedding since she felt that being apart was vital to ward off bad luck. Regretfully, or perhaps happily, I had to go back for my shoes since I had left them at home. A couple of hours after arriving at the hotel, my ex detested shutting off lights when leaving a room, so I was shocked to notice that the living room was dark when I got home. I couldn't believe she had remembered. The shoebox was very significant to me, so I walked inside and went straight to the bedroom where I kept it. However, I saw the scariest sight I had ever seen as I opened my room's door. My ex and my younger brother were laying in bed together, so engrossed in their performance that they hardly acknowledged my presence. They noticed me in a matter of seconds, but I was stuck in place, not knowing how to respond. When I finally realized what I had just seen, my entire world fell apart, and I immediately fled. I drove back to the hotel in a panic and hyperventilation, even though my ex called after me, blatantly rejecting what I had witnessed. This was crazy, because I was getting married the next day. After arriving at my room, I needed some time to gather myself, and when I did, I ended up crying for at least an hour. I was lucky that I hadn't let my ex know which hotel I was staying at, so she was just able to contact me, which is exactly what she did. She tried to persuade me that it was an isolated incident by sending me a barrage of apologies messages after it happened. I was still quite doubtful of her answer, though. She also said she wanted to release some pent-up energy since she was feeling overburdened by the impending wedding. She said that my brother had always supported her and that she didn't know who else to turn to at that time. After what I'd witnessed, I found it impossible to believe she was even attempting to clarify herself, so I blocked her right away. Since I didn't care for any of their nonsense excuses, I also banned my brother. After some time, I finally got myself together and called off all of the wedding plans. First and foremost, because I was going to escape this disaster regardless of the amount of money I lost. Since my ex had just squandered 10 years of my life, I was willing to spend a few $1,000s to avoid having to spend any more time with her. My next course of action was to phone my parents and inform them of the situation. They couldn't decide if they should take my brother away or comfort me. I gave them a little time to think about it. It was late in the evening by that point, so I ordered dinner and then sobbed myself to sleep. After that day, I saw my ex just twice more. She came home the first time to get her things and head off. The second occasion was at a party hosted by mutual friends a few years later. She tried to talk to me, but I walked away as soon as I saw her approaching. My parents broke off my brother because of what he did to me, and we haven't spoken since. He has been working in Europe for the past 3 years, as far as I know. In any case, I've been able to get over that terrible incident, and that is all behind me. She was a better lady whom I completely trust, and I'm in a better place now. Up until a few days ago, precisely 1 week before to my wedding, everything was going smoothly. I was contacted by my ex. She contacted me using a different Facebook account because I had blocked her original account first, and I'm not sure how she found out about me or my wedding. She wrote me many messages expressing how heartbroken she was to learn that I was getting married again. Given that we were never legally married despite our close marriage, I found it strange that she used the phrase once again. However, the setting seemed completely familiar. I was really affected by the way she begged me to accept her back in spite of her behavior and said that I was the only guy she had ever loved. I even informed my fiancé about it right away. This upset a part of me so much that I wanted to scold her for disturbing me prior to my wedding. But I had a darker side that was desperate for vengeance. I was aware that I had handled the matter like an adult and had done the proper thing all those years ago. But this time, I was really motivated to hurt her emotionally, to the point where she would never even think about contacting me again. Despite having been cheated on herself in the past, my fiancé was very supportive of the notion when I told her about my sentiments. Even if it was acknowledged that our relationship wasn't 10 years long, it nevertheless had a negative effect. So she understood my feelings. Instead of simply letting things go this time, we devised a scheme to get retribution and ensure that my ex suffered the same amount of misery that she caused me. For this reason, a few hours after she texted me, I chose to reply, stating that I was at last prepared to speak with her. She said she was ready to visit me right away, but I advised her to get a room at a hotel in the area. In order to keep my fiancé from becoming suspicious, I agreed to see her there the next day. My fiancé was at my side the entire time, and she shockingly accepted the plan. I so visited her hotel the following day. She was shedding happy tears and was ecstatic to meet me at the hour we decided upon. But in a few minutes, she would be shedding actual tears. She sat me down and began to tell me how sorry she was for what had transpired over the previous 12 years. She didn't know how to contact me until she learned from a friend that I was getting married again, but I wanted to make things right. She thought it was important to send one final SMS, worried that if she didn't, she would lose me forever. I pretended to be interested, listening intently and holding her hand as she talked. I waited impatiently for my fiancé to arrive at this time. After nearly 20 minutes, I hurried to open the door when I heard a knock, indicating her arrival. Following my fiancé's response, all of our bridesmaids and groomsmen donned masks depicting my brother's visage. My brother's smile was beaming up at us even after they brought in a cake. My former partner was so appalled that he was at a loss for words. She watched with a startled look on her face as we shouted surprise eyes. Because I doubt anyone would have anticipated this, since she had previously told the hotel personnel to let in any guests who wished to see her, something she had specifically meant for me, we were able to persuade them that we were surprise her, and it was not too difficult. However, I had other ideas. Once she had had time to comprehend what was going on, she began to weep and mutter some unintelligible nonsense. A week before my wedding, she messaged me, and I wasn't about to let her off the hook that easy. The day before our wedding, he was bold enough to cheat on me with my own brother. She now had to face the repercussions of her behavior. I made it plain that this was what she deserved and that any possibility of reconciliation would only be entertained following her treachery. Then she was completely mistaken. She had no right to text me after what she had done to me, and I was relieved that I had caused her pain because she had caused it herself. Despite my chilly and abrupt demeanor, she kept crying and told me that I should have blocked and ignored her if I didn't want her back, rather than making a special effort to make her feel so humiliated. However, I had absolutely no sympathy for her. Not now, not then. I left her sobbing alone in the hotel room after telling her not to talk to me ever again. I quote, am getting married in 2 days. However, some of my fiancé's friends feel that I should apologize to my ex because I reprimanded her in a severe manner that day. Some might contend that she didn't deserve this in spite of what she accomplished. But this is not the case with my groomsmen, who have known me since middle school. They are well aware of my struggles with depression and my fight for survival in the years after my separation with my ex because of the situation. They know how much she meant to me and how much I loved her. Therefore, they didn't criticize or care about what I had done. This was too honest and genuine for my fiancé's pals, who had likely been hoping for some high school drama to gossip about afterwards. Her friends are refusing to attend the wedding, but my fiancé is on my side and doesn't think I should apologize. I'm incredibly conflicted because, on the one hand, I don't want my followers to be disappointed on our wedding day if I don't do it now. She truly cherishes her pals, after all. However, I also don't believe I have any need to apologize to my ex. She just didn't want to see me happy. But she could have simply kept out of my life and this would never have occurred. She also attempted to play the victim by continuing to send texts from phony accounts about how I had broken her heart and that she would undoubtedly get even with me in the future. Not for my ex, and definitely not for my fiancé's bridesmaids. I'm not a big fan of this type of emotional manipulation. I feel somewhat obligated to apologize now, even though I know she will never ask me to do so for her own sake. And I'm here for that reason. I have to make a decision now since I'm running out of time. 80 for making my cheating ex seem bad. A week before my wedding, she made an attempt to reunite with me. To put it mildly, there has been a wide range of responses to this. The wedding is only a day away, and I made the decision to talk to my fiancée before taking any concrete action. I tell her how I've been feeling, as most others have advised. When I informed her, she immediately responded that I didn't have to apologize to my ex since her bridesmaids felt that same, and that they could miss her wedding if it upset them. Even after she revealed that my ex and I had been together for 10 years and that she had cheated on me with my brother, an act deemed unforgivably cruel and unforgivable. She revealed that her bridesmaids were ignorant of the specifics and that many of them thought I had overreacted. They were dubious, believing that I was being unfair and that I should apologize to her, even though the issue was serious. She so gave up on attempting to convince them of my point of view and even informed them that they were under no obligation to attend our wedding if they so desired. Her pals are unlikely to be attending, and she hasn't spoken to them in a whole day. She had purchased all of them, and one of them even reimbursed her for the price of the bridesmaid outfit. She also believes that the majority of them will skip. I know she's in pain, but she's putting up a brave front for me. My fiancé claims she doesn't care because she has been friends with these women since high school. In her heart, though, I know she does. I have thus made the decision to speak with her friends and attempt to persuade them on my own. My former partner has turned into a real annoyance. She managed to phone me a few hours ago and tried to quarrel with me for a whole 15 minutes. She insisted that I was still in love with her, but I was too proud to acknowledge it. What made her believe that? She claims that I humiliated her after going to such extent. Thus, it's clear that I still harbored affections for her. Deep inside, yes, she is correct. However, such emotions are revulsion and hatred. Whatever the cause, she thinks, all I wanted was a final glimpse of her. I'd grasped her hands during her conversation because of this. To be honest, though, that was just shocking. More than that. She continued to babble about how we were soulmates and that I needed to call off the wedding before I made a big mistake, even though I was physically laughing in her face while I was speaking to her in the hopes that she would get the message. Really, The only reason I'm thinking about any of this is to save her from making any unfortunate choices. To help with her removal, I've been trying to get in touch with her parents, but I haven't been successful yet. As such, I am awaiting their response with patience. I'll be able to break up with her permanently after they take over. I still detest her, don't get me wrong, but I also don't want her to harm herself. That quote is not how inhuman I am. Hello, everyone. Thus, we are now legally wed. A few days have passed since the ceremony, and I still find it hard to believe. She's my wife now. Although I'm overjoyed, there is still some depressing news. I tried to get her friends to attend the wedding, but they ultimately did not. I individually phoned each of them to explain why I didn't want to apologize and why I had done what I had done. However, they were not really fond of it. They weren't very thrilled when I requested them to come only for my wife. And it just sounded strange to me since even if I didn't like the person a buddy was getting married to, I would still go to their wedding. It wasn't until yesterday that I found out the true reason. My wife eventually admitted that she had suspected her pals wouldn't be there. Whether I apologized or not, it was only because she had disagreed with them and refused to perform what they had requested of her. They constantly needed to present a unified front since they didn't like that at all and felt that they were one unit. She had known these high school pals for a long time, and although they had been able to maintain their friendship over the years since they had not had many major arguments, this was the first time their relationship had been put to the test. In this case, her decision to pick me over her friends didn't sit well with them. She acknowledged that she was a little disturbed by the circumstance, but she was too ashamed to say so, believing that the entire issue is childish. However, I didn't mind, because I was now certain that her pals were only self-centered, and that I wasn't actually to blame for this. My wife even said that she was relieved they had declined to go, since it meant she could finally stop trying to fit in and live her life without having to continuously get her friends' approval. We thus benefited from that, I guess. Additionally, the night before my wedding, I received a response from my ex's parents. I quickly told them what their daughter had attempted to do, and that in order to protect her, they needed to go to the hotel where she had been sleeping and bring her back with them. She was acting quite irrationally and crazy. She shouldn't have been left alone, in my opinion. They were trekking without network connectivity, it turns out. Nevertheless, when they returned, they thanked me for alerting them and promised to come and retrieve her as soon as possible. I assume they were successful in getting her back home, but I haven't heard anything since. Hello, everyone. My wedding was a week ago, and regrettably, the only thing that has happened since then is turmoil. Since the last time I spoke with her parents, neither my girlfriend nor her parents had been in contact with me, as I had said. They didn't take her home, which surprised me. When someone knocked on our door 2 nights ago, my wife and I weren't expecting anyone, so we didn't know who it may be because it was so late. My ex pushed by me and entered with her baggage as I opened the door due to my error of opening it before checking the cameras. When my ex entered the room, my wife, who was seated on the couch, actually sprung to her feet. Just as I was about to ask her why she was in my home, she informed me that she was always going to be here. She informed me that her parents had arrived a few days before to take her home, but she had refused to go because she knew I would be picking her up shortly. All of this seemed so bizarre that my wife and I were in disbelief and unsure of how to respond. She informed me that she had a heated argument with her parents and ultimately stayed at the hotel when they attempted to make it return with them. She decided to move in with me as she was now out of money. She reasoned that if we spent enough time together again, it may bring back memories of the past and make me fall in love with her again. The scenario was so bizarre that I was completely confused and unsure of how to respond. My wife made an effort to talk to her, but she completely disregarded her and kept talking to me, pleading with me to allow her to live with us. I gently informed Rose that I was now married and that she couldn't simply move in with me. However, she said that she didn't approve of the wedding, thus, in her opinion, I was still single. She seemed really unstable, and I thought she needed assistance. So even though I couldn't believe this was happening, I also didn't have the heart to throw her out. I set her down and instructed her to wait in the living room while my wife and I went to the bedroom to decide what to do next. Fortunately, my wife was also quite understanding and saw that my ex's behavior was rather strange. We saw that she needs significant expert assistance. I attempted to contact her parents, but they refused to answer my calls or texts, stating that she was obviously too insane to live with them and that they could no longer make her return. It was her own now. Her parents were clearly ashamed of her, and it was depressing to see how willing they were to leave their own daughter when they became aware of her problems, with no other choice. I responded by calling my own parents, who showed up in less than 30 minutes. The good news was that my ex had slept off on the couch in the meanwhile. When my parents arrived, we made the decision to get her to a therapist right away, since we weren't sure what she would be able to do given her recent behavior. Since the whole thing was so depressing, my wife and I decided to let her stay that night, since, to be honest, we couldn't force ourselves to dislike her anymore. She obviously needed to be treated as soon as possible since something had suddenly occurred to her. Furthermore, the impoverished woman had lost even her parents as a source of support. The following day, when my parents and I accompanied her to the hospital, she was still talking endlessly about how happy she was that I was at last getting well and had even begun organizing our wedding. Despite several difficulties and issues, she steadfastly refused to see a mental health expert, even when we brought her to one. Eventually, the physicians used medication, drugs I can't remember the names of, to help her relax. It seemed like she was more calmer after the procedure. It took her a few hours to eventually say that she wanted to go home. After I took her home, my family and I sat in the living room discussing our next course of action while letting her sleep in the room. When she declared that she was ready to go home, my wife and I were quite relieved and even assisted her in packing the items in our car's trunk. Together, we took the car home. She didn't say anything during the experience, which left us speechless in such a trying circumstance. When she got home, she told us both how sorry she was for the trouble she had created and how ashamed she was of everything that had happened. Throughout the encounter, my wife and I felt uncomfortable, but we told her it was all right and suggested that she put herself first before returning home. I called my ex's mother and told her everything that had transpired, even though I wasn't sure whether it would be helpful, and I suppose that's what eventually made them see how serious the situation was. She informed me she had moved in with her daughter and promised to keep us informed, and my wife and I sincerely hope she recovers, regardless of what has transpired thus far. Story 4. My ex-wife chose to leave me after having an affair last year. Strangely enough, I was relieved when it occurred. Our marriage may have appeared to be happy on the surface, but it was utterly hollow on the inside. Because of the financial and emotional toll she had on me, I felt devastated for years. She frequently took substantial amounts of money out of my account, making it difficult for me to pay our payments. Every time I questioned her about it. She flipped the blame on me, saying that I wasn't making enough money. She never thought my efforts were good enough. She appeared annoyed or upset by anything I did. I would make an effort to schedule family outings or dates for us in the goal of spending time together. However, she never showed any interest. She would become agitated or complain, wanting to just sleep in bed. I eventually stopped attempting to involve her in anything, which naturally caused her to whine more. Despite her lack of enthusiasm in participating in the first place, she accused me of keeping the kids away from her. She eventually started staying away from home at night. When I questioned her, she became annoyed and told me it was none of my concern where she was, even though, at first, she would claim she was sleeping at a friend's house, someone I hardly knew. I was feeling conflicted when my ex-wife said she wanted a divorce. I was rather concerned about how my life would turn out following the divorce, on the one hand. However, I couldn't help but feel pleased that our terrible marriage was coming to an end. I took the time to thoroughly review every document that her attorney forwarded to me. As it turned out, her attorney was careless and made several errors in the documentation. Our divorce hearing was ultimately postponed by several months as a result of these mistakes. I would return the documents without signing them each time I saw an error. After then, they would need to be corrected and sent again by his office. However, they would frequently repeat their previous errors or create new ones. The documentation also had some really serious errors. My name was misspelled. Her name misrepresented our child's name and birthday, as well as both of our own. They misidentified our marriage date, named children who weren't ours, and even misidentified our home location. They featured businesses that weren't ours, dogs that weren't ours, and properties that weren't ours. Even proposing a $500,000 payment for companies we didn't control. I thought it was hilarious that her lawyer's name was misspelled in one of the drafts. I was in the restroom and joked about it. Before they were able to correct the majority of these errors, it took around 7 revisions. However, there were still significant mistakes in the final document that was sent to the court. The sheer volume of errors and their simplicity made the entire procedure both stressful and somewhat humorous. Knowing that at least these misunderstandings were dragging things down and allowing me time to get ready for what was coming next, helped to make a challenging situation a bit more tolerable. My ex-wife's attorney attempted to convince the judge throughout our divorce procedures that I should pay all court and legal costs, but I was able to refute this with a compelling argument. I made it clear that they, not me, were mostly to blame for the process's delays. The documentation they supplied me had so many mistakes that it took longer to correct everything. The judge did not order me to pay those costs as a result. My ex-wife moved in with the man she left me for after our divorce. As it happens, he has been abusive and is not a decent man at all. She abruptly stopped having access to my money after I changed all of my banking passwords. She was somewhat taken aback when she soon discovered how much she depended on my money to maintain her standard of living. The situation was exacerbated by the fact that she had been handling the payments for the house where we were staying, even though it officially belonged to her uncle because she was not paying. The bank nearly took the house away. Her uncle came to me in dire need of assistance. He informed me that I would have to make the back payments she had skipped, which came to almost $15,000 for 6 months of delinquent mortgage, if I wanted to remain in the house. I proposed purchasing the house from him since I didn't have that type of cash laying around. I was shocked when he said yes. The house that belonged to my ex-wife's grandma is now mine. The divorce has been finalized for a year. At work, I got promoted, and that came with a big pay raise. I'm still in the same house, and whenever I can afford it, I try to make changes. Although I haven't met a new partner, I've been having fun being single and meeting new people through online dating. In hindsight, it's almost comical that my ex-wife abandoned a secure relationship for someone who was very different from what she had anticipated, and that her actions almost cost her uncle his property. Although it didn't seem like it at the time, her choice to divorce me turned out to be a great benefit to me in a manner. When she discovers that the grass isn't greener on the other side, she may attempt to return to you. But keep in mind that you should never accept her back and don't allow her tears influence you. I'll give you the latest news now. It will be 1 year since my divorce was completed on November 3rd. Over the past year, I've made a lot of progress in bettering myself. I began going to a therapist who advised me to concentrate on my own development, and I have been doing just that. I lost more than 50 pounds after making dietary and activity changes. Since I've always loved soccer, I resumed playing on a regular basis and even began coaching my children's youth team. In addition, I rekindled my passion for reading and resolved to read a new book each week. At work, too. My efforts have paid off. It has been considerably simpler for me to care for myself and my child since I got a significant rise and a promotion. Even with all of these improvements, my ex-wife feels the need to rejoin our life. The man she believed would save her from our awful marriage has become violent in her most recent connection. He has been violent, and she was hospitalized for one particularly bad episode. We had to call for an ambulance because our toddler was with her at the time. My ex-wife won't face charges or acknowledge what happened, even in light of the evidence. However, the tale is evident from the bruises. I was at a family gathering just last night. They asked me over, and I've always gotten along well with this side of the family. Although I was courteous to my ex-wife, I avoided talking to her and maintained a safe distance. Her family, however, seems to have persuaded her that we are still in love, which is completely untrue. I was not satisfied at all, even if my ex-wife could have been content with our marital status. In the latter 2 years of our relationship, I became so reclusive and inattentive that it seemed like I was only there to provide her with more money. In the last year of our marriage, she exploited me both financially and emotionally. She was having an affair with someone else. She would always deny everything and go to his apartment if I tried to discuss her affair with her. She accused me of not being supportive enough when I eventually caught her red-handed. In actuality, though, I was giving her every penny I made after covering our expenses. Due to financial constraints, I hadn't even purchased new shoes or clothes for myself in years. Then she unexpectedly showed up at one of the soccer matches. She asked me whether I was ready to move back in with her after the game. I questioned her why in the world I would do anything like that since I was so shocked. She began by telling me all about how we are still in love. We have a child together, and we believe that raising them jointly will benefit them more. I had to be honest with her. I no longer had any love or trust for her. She still owes me more than $1,100 for fixing her car, and I even informed her of that. What did she say? If we moved in together, she promised to reimburse me. I couldn't contain my laughter at that point and simply started laughing. I doubled over because it was so hard. She broke down when she saw me laughing, which, to be honest, made me laugh even more. Perhaps it wasn't the most kind response, but after all I've gone through and all the work I've done to better myself, returning to her, the exact person who hurt me so much, seemed like the worst course of action. I would never do anything to break the bond between my child and his mother, who still has a lot of affection for her. If she needs to turn away, I think she'll take care of it on her own by acting accordingly. I was surprised when she proposed that we move back in together. She didn't express regret or give an apology for what she had done in the past. She simply suggested that we move back in together, pretending that she is doing something worthwhile. Her way of thinking is really somewhat bizarre. Then there is our toddler, who had to endure the heartbreaking experience of witnessing his mother in danger. That has the potential to have a profound impact on him. In order to keep him out of such a dangerous situation, I believe it's critical to attempt to obtain full custody. Once more. Now for my most recent news, I've met a very remarkable person. I hope we can all find our own forms of happiness, even though I know it will take time for everyone to recover from all of these occurrences. For me, the past year has been a roller coaster regardless of the choices we make with our relationships. On November 3rd, I commemorated the first anniversary of my divorce. Since then, I've been dating and concentrating on improving myself via treatment. Admittedly, I've met some amazing ladies, but I've also met a couple who weren't a good fit for me. My ex-wife saw a Facebook post from my girlfriend just this Monday. Distribute. We had a great excursion together over the weekend, and Cher had shared some pictures. We had a great day taking lots of interesting pictures, indulging in delectable cuisine, and enjoying a few beverages. I genuinely enjoy sharing, but I'm not generally the kind to take photographs of my dates. I was so pleased to comply when she requested whether she may tag me in photos of our vacation. I was quite certain there would be some trouble if I shared those pictures. However, my ex-wife and her family's response to me was really strong. To complete the image, let me give you a little additional background. Before we formally dissolved our marriage, my ex-wife had been unfaithful for more than a year. She moved in with her lover while our divorce was still pending, and she was already dating someone else before we split up. We have now been separated for a year. My ex-wife abused me during our marriage by manipulating me emotionally and financially. She is still abusive, unfortunately, but she became much more hostile and disrespectful to me after I shared those pictures. She fabricated the tale on Monday to make it appear like I was the one who had cheated. She bemoaned how embarrassing it was for me to make fun of her by posting images of me with other women on social media. She called me a coward for keeping the fact that I'm seeing other people a secret, and accused me of being inconsiderate and selfish for not taking her feelings into account. She went so far as to imply that my actions had ruined any chance of us ever reconciling, claiming that my cheating ways destroyed whatever remaining love she may have had for me. She was yelling and scolding me on the phone during the entire time she was making these claims. In the meanwhile, I found her assertions' irony to be funny. Even though she was the one who cheated and was violent during our relationship, she spent a solid 30 minutes complaining that I had betrayed her and destroyed our relationship. I simply laughed. I told my ex-wife that I had been totally true and devoted until our relationship ended when she questioned me about my loyalty during our marriage. But she didn't stop there. She continued by asking me about my dating experiences following our split. That made me laugh even more, and because we are no longer together, I firmly informed her that she should not worry about my personal life. I told her she had no right to interfere in my affairs, just as I don't interfere in hers. In spite of my efforts to establish this boundary, she sent me a barrage of extremely nasty and abusive texts criticizing both Cher, my current girlfriend, and me. She also threatened to send Cher direct messages spewing disparaging remarks about my marriage. If she felt it would make a difference, I told her she may try. Cher must be a horrible person for allegedly ending a nice marriage, according to my ex-wife, who then stated that she wanted to see Cher in person to see what type of lady she is. I had to really doubt her grasp of reality at that point. She had an affair, left me for someone else, and filed for divorce, and I told her straight out that our marriage had ended more than a year ago. My ex-wife started weeping through her tears at this moment. She said that she had been hoping that we might make amends in some way. "It's unjust," she protested. "I had found someone else to spend time with and had moved on," urging me to concentrate on spending time with her and our child as though we were still a family. This entire exchange demonstrated my ex-wife's apparent inability to face the consequences of her own conduct, which ultimately led to the dissolution of our marriage and how detached from reality she had become. Recently, my ex-wife told me that she is dissatisfied with her partner and that he doesn't treat her properly. To be honest, this discovery didn't surprise me because I had long suspected it. But I don't feel any better after learning about her issues. In actuality, I no longer feel anything for her, and I have no desire to reunite with her. If we didn't have to communicate at all, that would be better. On the plus side, though, I'm having a great time right now. Cher, my girlfriend, and I have found happiness together. She makes my life so much more joyful, and I constantly look forward to seeing her. She is the first person I contact when I get up, and the final person I speak to before turning in for the night. In the near future, we even have another vacation planned. I know my ex-wife could react negatively if I share pictures of our vacation, but I believe that having a happy life is worth any criticism. I can now see that my ex-wife has consistently attempted to paint me as the villain, which is a textbook example of narcissistic conduct toward others who are offering me advice. You're correct. I should refrain from being drawn into lengthy, meaningless discussions with her and limit our contact to our child. And while I'm ready for the chance that she would attempt to disseminate false information about me, my main goal is to move on in a constructive manner. Let ES take a moment to contemplate. March 21st, 2022, was the day when everything changed for me 2 years ago. Not only did I find proof of one affair that late in 2021, but I also found evidence of maybe more. I tried to patch things up for a year after 23 years of marriage, 2 biological children, and a stepchild. However, it was hard to continue attempting to reconcile because of her persistent problems with mental health, PTSD, substance misuse, and secretive conduct, such as discovering a second phone she was using. She shot me in the side of the bed, which was the last straw in our marriage. I took the decision to put a stop to things permanently after that awful moment. In April, I filed for divorce, and by June, everything was done. I felt a great sense of relief. I felt as though I had been granted another opportunity at life. I hadn't realized how much anxiety and worry I had been dealing with until then. I can see all the blunders I made after learning of her treachery in retrospect. I responded incorrectly. I hurried into attempting to mend our relationship without addressing the underlying problems, rather than taking the time to think things out. By the time we started treatment, we had made the grave mistake of delaying seeking help. It was too late to change anything already. I felt a mixture of sadness, rage, shame, and heartbreak since our kids had already lost all regard for their mother. I felt like a zombie and was barely surviving each day. The amount of people who contacted out to give their support in April of last year was so overwhelming. Following the social media slander campaign, my ex-wife started on me. She accused me of everything, including rape, assault, and stealing a substantial sum of money. Naturally, she neatly omitted what she had done. In response, I posted a brief PSA claiming that none of the charges were accurate in order to clear my name. I hoped that others would be open to giving me the opportunity to establish my innocence, but I also understood if some individuals felt the need to keep their distance from me. I concentrated on bettering myself in the interim. I lost weight, going from 250 to 185 pounds. I also took on a new position that came with the promotion, which was a big professional step. I intended to use phone applications for casual dating in order to experience a summer of vengeance. A former high school friend contacted me at this period. She was going through a similar split after learning of her partner's infidelity and lived far away. We began communicating on a regular basis, giving empathy and support. About 6 months after we ended up messaging one evening to catch up and share our experiences when I had to drive to Knoxville for work. As I spoke up how amazing the next 2 evenings would be, I had been looking forward to seeing some live music while I was there. However, my summer did not end up being as full with casual flings as I had jokingly envisioned, despite my original assumptions. Rather, a summer full of beach excursions, live music, and distillery tours took place. because she really likes whiskey and just having a good time, which I hadn't done in years. As summer gave way to October, our bond became stronger. We were able to spend Christmas together, Thanksgiving with her family, meet one other's families, and even travel to Las Vegas for a long weekend of the Super Bowl. We became closer as a result of all these encounters. I am now very content as I celebrate my 52nd birthday. Since she's moving in with me, this birthday seems very special and wonderful, unlike the previous two, which were really difficult. She's a nurse who found work in my city in the South rather fast. She has made the decision to maintain her home and allow her daughter to rent it out. What if a buddy were in my shoes? I could have warned them that it's too soon and too much. However, it seems like the appropriate thing to do for us. We're not in a rush to get married or do anything similar. We're just two individuals that are fed up with juggling our schedules and losing time with one another. To find out if our relationship is as solid as we think it is, we are moving in together. Many individuals discuss karma or exacting revenge on their ex-partners on this site. In my situation, my ex continues to text me when intoxicated and frequently expresses her desire for us to be together. They're apologizing and accusing me of being the reason behind our separation. She apologizes half the time, but she still believes that I am to blame for everything else. In actuality, though, I'm happy now that she's gone. In addition to meeting someone amazing, I'm less stressed. She is incredible, much more than I ever thought I'd be with. She's also quite interested in me, despite my occasional concerns that it could be too wonderful to be true. Therefore, I believe that simply by leading a good life, I have already received the best kind of retribution. I want to tell everyone that even if the things that occurred to you due of your relationship or marriage were terrible, you can still go on and find happiness. Sometimes people are unaware of their blessings until they are gone. However, you may discover that you're better off once you've crossed over. I told you my tale to encourage you to persevere through difficult times. A new beginning is always possible. Never forget to prioritize yourself and believe in your capacity to bounce back and prosper. It is possible for things to go better. I proved that it's feasible at any age by starting a new one at the age of 50. That concludes the status report for today. Remember to like and subscribe if you're following along so you don't miss any more stories. Till the next occasion. Farewell. Story 5. After 6 years, my family wants to get back in touch. All right, so please be patient with me while I explain this lengthy narrative in English, which is not my native language. Here, I'm using fictitious names. I'm Mike, and I'm 45 years old. Sarah, my 45-year-old high school sweetheart, was my wife. Together, we have 4 daughters. Jane is 24 years old, Tori is 22 years old, Brianna is 21 years old, and Claire, who is 18. I was barely 14 years old when I first met Sarah. We immediately began dating. Sarah was adored by my parents from the start. They treated her like a member of the family, and she became like the daughter they never had. My father sat me down and gave me dating advice, I recall. Always have good communication with each other and think before you make any big decisions, he would advise. I made an effort to heed the wise counsel. Sarah and I dated throughout high school and beyond, and we remained together for 7 years. Then one day we learned that she was expecting Jane, our first daughter. Happiness was erupting in both of us. Soon after learning of the pregnancy, we made the decision to be married, and we have since started a lovely family. Nevertheless, amid all of this joy, there remained a significant issue. Jack, my younger brother, is currently 43 years old. Even during our high school years, Jack had a constant infatuation on Sarah. There was some friction between us because of this infatuation of his. I loved my brother, but I also loved Sarah, and I didn't want anything to get in the way of our relationship, so it was incredibly difficult for me. Since Jack was my brother and Sarah had repeatedly informed me that she had no feelings for him, I made an effort to ignore it. However, rather than being pleased for us, Jack's reaction when he learned that Sarah and I were engaged was incredibly negative. He attempted to get Sarah to leave me for him after confessing his love for her. Being the amazing person that she is, Sarah filled me in on everything. She made it obvious that she had no interest in Jack and didn't keep anything from me. When I discovered what Jack had done, she wanted to be with me because she loved me. I was enraged. I was wounded and felt deceived. I was prepared to face him and, if necessary, to fight him. I didn't want my happiness with Sarah to be ruined by him. I also couldn't trust Jack anymore, and I was prepared to shut him out of my life entirely. Sarah, the mediator, cautioned me against acting hastily. She didn't want Jack's behavior to tear our family apart. I tried to put it behind me after listening to Sarah. I wanted to do what was best for our family, even if it was incredibly difficult. Sarah and I concentrated on raising our girls and creating a life together throughout the years. Despite all of the difficulties we encountered, we never wavered and helped one another out. Sarah and my parents, my 68-year-old dad and my 66-year-old mom, had to persuade me to keep my brother Jack in my life. Like any other couple, Sarah and I had a wonderful marriage. Even though we had our ups and downs, I wouldn't alter a thing. We were a devoted couple who cherished each other and our kids beyond anything else. After the event, I felt that Jack had moved past his crush on Sarah, and our friendship improved. However, I was mistaken. Jack still harbored feelings for Sarah and intended to end our relationship. More than 6 years ago, one day. After a week gone due to work, I returned home. My wife, brother, and children were all in the living room when I arrived. My girls and Sarah were sobbing, and they screamed at me when they saw me. "How could you do this to me?" Sarah questioned, glancing at me. Perplexed, I inquired as to her meaning. "Cheating," she claimed. I was surprised. I had never cheated on her in our 25 years of dating. When I questioned her about why she believed I had strayed, she gave me some messages and images that purportedly demonstrated my affair with a coworker. I questioned her about the source of this knowledge. My brother Jack immediately jumped in and said that this buddy and coworker had confessed to him and provided him with the evidence. I broke down in tears and pleaded with Sarah to believe me. She did not trust me when I informed her that Jack was solely to blame for this. She threw me out of the home after giving me a facial smack. I was devastated and unsure of what to do before I went. It seemed unbelievable to me that Jack would go to such lengths to attempt to destroy my family. Despite having to leave, I was committed to proving my innocence and reuniting with my family. Tori and Jane called me a variety of derogatory names. The statement, "You are a disgrace to our family," was the one that wounded the most. I spent a lot of time trying to convince the girls and Sarah that things were reasonable. Unfortunately, it was all in vain since I wanted them to know that I would never cheat on them. My father claimed that if I were a true man, I would have a simple and speedy divorce before the year ended, and my parents shunned me. My girls stopped wanting to see me when Sarah and I eventually got divorced. Sarah and Jack were married in the start of 2017. I received a message from my daughter expressing that they detested me and didn't want to interact with me. They said that a new father figure had entered their lives. Although it was really difficult, I eventually learned to move on after a lot of treatment. My hope was always that my family would learn the truth. However, I came to accept that they might never do so. I didn't communicate with any of my family members for 5 years. Then I got a call from an unidentified number a few days ago. "Hello?" I said when I picked up. "Who is this?" And on the opposite side, I heard tears. It was my mother. "They wanted to meet with me and apologized," she added. My mother said that my family had discovered the truth about everything when I questioned why. However, she stated that this was a topic best handled face-to-face. I promised my mother that I would give her a call when or if I felt prepared to meet them. I didn't want anyone to get in touch with me until I responded. She said she missed me and that she understood. Although we said our goodbyes, I must admit that I'm still unsure of what to do. Before reading the latest version, let's look at the top comments. "I'm so sorry." In a similar article, her family expelled her when the sister dragged her and accused her of cheating Iran on her engagement. The extent to which individuals will go out of envy is astounding. "Your brother committed a wicked act. I hope he may be sued for parental alienation and mental anguish if there is actual evidence of what he did. The harm he has caused to your girls is beyond my comprehension. In case this isn't simply your brother's ruse, I would also have your daughter's DNA examined. How terrible this entire experience must have been for you is beyond me. Your ability to remain composed in the face of all of this speaks volumes about your character. No matter how minor a victory I achieve, my dishonest brother simply won't let me be pleased. However, he hasn't yet done me something this significant. I have no doubt that you will make a well-informed decision. The unfortunate thing is that my brother was never this way. Knowing that he had planned against me, I genuinely thought he was pleased for me and had moved on. It still aches this way. I concur with the others. Only agree to meet with them if they will be interrupting your brother. I apologize for framing you in this way. To do this to a family member, one needs a certain amount of malice and envy. It should be totally up to you whether or not you choose to meet with them. In any event, I hope you can move past this and find some sort of closure. Whoa. I doubt I would return if it were up to me. A family is not what I would pick. I wasn't picked by them. Furthermore, I wouldn't even want to touch my spouse if he married my sister. She clearly knew he was crushing on her, but she still decided to believe him rather than you, which just goes to show how little she loved and trusted you to simply toss it away like that and not even get married outside the family. However, the first brother in the family attempted to convince her to leave before the wedding. Is she a moron? It can't be that innocent, can it? I'm sorry that you're experiencing this. I'm waiting for some news and wish you well. Now, for the latest information. A correction has been requested by a few individuals, so here it is. I rang the door when I got to my parents' house on Saturday morning, and my mother answered. She began to weep and gave me a hug. I felt a little uncomfortable. I shook hands with my dad and climbed in. My mother began attempting to strike up a conversation. She inquired about my well-being. She went on to say that I had dropped weight and looked much better. I answered, "You forget to eat when you're feeling down." Then I inquired as to how they learned. "I didn't plan all this so that I would take your shit," my mother responded, referring to Jack's drunken altercation with Sarah. Then Sarah had him tell the truth. Sarah. My mom suggested it would be best if she reached out to me alone, even if my daughters wanted to get in touch. I burst out laughing. I was questioned, "What's so funny?" by my quite irate father. It all blew out when I mentioned that my brother had likely tried to keep me and Sarah apart for years. I just needed to be quiet so he could carry on with his lovely life. After my brother tried to get Sarah to flee with him, I asked my parents whether they could see their life without trying to persuade Sarah to forgive him. My father broke down in tears. My elderly guy was sobbing for the first time in my 45 years of existence. He began to express regret, stating that while he was a terrible parent, he, my mom, Sarah, and my girls were all remorseful. I informed them that although I would want to make amends, it would take time since I couldn't bring myself to weep. I agreed when my mother asked if she could authorize Sarah to get in touch with me. They wanted to know how I was doing, so he asked me additional questions about my life. All in all, it exceeded my expectations. Sarah messaged me the next day to ask if she might give me a call. A few hours later, I responded that she couldn't quote T. She phoned me even 5 minutes later. She inquired about my well-being. It might be worse, I assured her, considering the situation. She told me that she and her girls weren't doing well when I inquired how they were, following my brother's admission. Sarah. After feeling guilty, my daughters expelled my brother. I respond to certain inquiries. Why did she wed Jack so soon? Why didn't she believe me, too? She broke down in tears. She said that my brother had been her pillar of support both before and after our divorce. According to Sarah, they finally began dating and were married as a result. And hearing this startled me. She became pregnant. It surprised me when I heard it. She repeated it when I asked her to. I needed time, I informed her. I didn't want her to have unrealistic expectations, so I cautioned that the likelihood of us reconciling is slim. She said she understood, but she started crying a little more. "I love you," was how she concluded the chat. I just bid them farewell. My mother served as a conduit for communication between my girls and me. We met yesterday after she suggested a park after I messaged her about wanting to meet my girls in a public setting. My girls were already there when I arrived. Jane, my 24-year-old, leaped on me before I could even understand that I was seeing them for the first time in almost 5 years. She started apologizing and pleading with me while weeping. Do not despise them. For a few minutes, we held each other tightly. She didn't appear to want me to go. My 18-year-old Claire had to remove Jane from me in order to visit my 22-year-old, who inquired about my well-being. I stared at her for a moment. Her growth over the past few years still caught me off guard. The last 6 years, however, also seemed to rush across my eyes. After the divorce, I spent some time thinking about the good old days and pondering if life was still worth living while looking at photos of Sarah, the daughters, and myself together. I informed Tori that I had gotten a cat after a little pause. I told her that he was my best buddy and a wonderful cat, and that I wouldn't be here talking to her if it weren't for him. As soon as I finished speaking, my daughters all burst into tears. Even though I was sobbing inside as I stared at them, I managed to keep my composure. They all apologized for not believing me and pleaded with me to pardon them. I assured them that, although I loved them unconditionally, I would need time to fully forgive them and that they would need to express their regret to me via their deeds rather than their words. Jane had a ring on, and I saw it. I questioned her about it. She informed me that 2 years ago she and her longtime partner were married. Now that I knew I had missed my daughter's wedding, I was on the verge of crying. She answered in a low voice, "Yes," when I inquired if she had walked down the aisle. I started weeping uncontrollably because I simply couldn't handle it any longer. I had to acknowledge that a hole had stolen me of all I valued. Walking my daughter down the aisle was one of the things I longed for the most. I was sobbing and looking awful, and I could see Jane was also depressed. I assured her that I wouldn't worry about it and that I would go on. She simply gave me another wordless embrace. We remained in that state for a considerable amount of time. Jane expressed her regret once again when we ended the embrace. My girls agreed when I said that I needed a few days, but I would really like to have family therapy with them. It was nice to have a casual talk with my girls as we catch up on one another's lives. I got their phone numbers from them. I gave each and every one of them a long, firm embrace as we said our goodbyes. I want to begin the third post by expressing my gratitude to everyone for their support. I've been receiving messages from a user, and his advice on my predicament has been really beneficial. I told him that Jack was somewhat always competitive, and that our parents always complimented him for his grades. This guy viewed Sarah and my girls as trophies, and thought my brother may be a narcissist. Last Saturday, my girls and I went to therapy. I entered first and told the therapist that I was worried that Jack was a narcissist. She informed me that although it was not definite, my worries may be valid. Although a little emotional, my therapy session was beneficial. I began by describing how I felt throughout this entire period, how many nights I sobbed, how I missed Sarah and the children, how I experienced nightmares, and how difficult it was for me. Although my girls did speak, it was difficult to grasp what they were saying. They sobbed the entire time, and as time passed, their tears became more intense, till I had to reassure them that I wasn't angry with them. The session came to a conclusion, and although I'm not sure what will happen, we will go to our second session on Friday. I'm optimistic that I can mend my friendship with my girlfriends. On Tuesday, I also had supper with my girls. They brought a copy of our photos, and they got to meet my cat. It went well. It was a good present. While on a work trip, she added, "Tell my wife." I didn't think she would do this. My wife, who is 39, and I, who are 43, have been married for 6 years and have been together for 11. Our child is a toddler. 5 days ago, I found out about a month-long affair between my wife and a co-worker. 2 weeks before, on a work trip, they had spent time in her hotel room, which included a lot of kissing. I found out about this through a Facebook message from the mother of the affair partner's wife, the affair partner's mother-in-law, who sent me 15 screenshots of their Instagram conversation from that work trip. The screenshots included comments between the two of them recalling their chair time, as well as numerous kissy face emojis and other flirtatious banter. I was trembling, my heart pounding, and I had tunnel vision as I read the mother-in-law's first Facebook message. When my wife returned downstairs after being upstairs, I asked her if there was anything I should know about that had transpired on the business trip. Here, I discovered that the phrase is called trickle truth. The answer was denials of anything that had occurred. 10 minutes later, she eventually confessed to making out with him in her room after getting wasted at the hotel bar. I questioned her directly whether there had been any sexual activity or if she had slept with him. "No," she said emphatically. She continued by telling me that there was just prolonged kissing while seated in a chair, no sexual contact, no hands-up shirts, no exposed parts, no feeling up, and no erections felt. She has told me this more than once. Well, he took the initiative at the entryway. They then approached the chair. He lay on the other side of the king-sized bed until 6:30 a.m., while she ended up being ill and spending time on the bed, the floor, and the bathroom. The following evening, while traveling to a different place for work. It lasted for 2 nights. He stayed in her hotel room till 10 o'clock at night. Or so. She replied, "You can join," in response to his text message, inquiring whether she might use some company. She was also watching television. She also kissed a few others that night while she was sober. Prior to this work trip, my wife, who has struggled with alcohol for many years, had been sober for over 6 years. We talked about her wish to reintroduce alcohol into her life, but only on special occasions like date nights or when she went out with me. Featured a conversation about her enjoying drinks with her co-workers on these quarterly outings. She made the idea even though I and practically everyone else in the alcoholism sub clearly disagreed with it. She told me she had many drinks that night, including 2 shots of the hotel bar with her co-workers, but she lied to me about how much she had consumed. This is the first time she has been intoxicated in 6 years. Then, this occurs. Go back to the E. According to what I've been informed, the flirting, teasing, and other activities have been occurring since early October. I questioned my wife about her actions. If, as she claims, our marriage is strong, which it is. Together we had a child. We have a nice home life and don't really dispute about anything. Since she gave birth to her kid 2 years ago, our closeness has decreased. The bedroom isn't dead, though. She told me that it was the thrill, the novelty, and the sense of being wanted, in addition to his being a fantastic co-worker, after she had had some time to consider what she had done. Following more in-depth conversations about this school of thought, she said that it probably wouldn't have ever became sexual. I had repeatedly inquired as to how far this would have progressed had neither the AP spouse nor I been aware of this. She came to the conclusion that she liked it since it made him crunch out of his skin, as she puts it, thus giving her some satisfaction over being wanted and desirable, which would probably never be satisfied by a physical relationship. She kept telling me that it just happened and that she had no romantic or personal feelings for this guy. She acknowledged that it was incorrect and self-centered. I told her that the betrayal and the secrecy were the things that wounded me the most. Her problematic connection with drinking caused me to lose sleep and experience a great deal of worry when she left on her work trip. I had no idea that it was the least of my concerns. I received a text the next morning that said, "Baby, so you just have to trust me." I never thought she would do this, though, when I asked her how much she had consumed the night before. I found out that this isn't the first time the affair partner has done this to his wife. She did look at his Instagram conversations on a different device over their 7 years of marriage. She had a feeling something might happen while he was away on his work trip, so she actually saw the combinations happen live. I've communicated with her via text, and she has a really kind but wounded lady who is probably going to get a divorce. But it's clear that he doesn't give a damn about the harm he does her or the harm he has let to happen to others. I thus have mixed thoughts about her brief romance and the potential consequences. Ever since that day, I've experienced intense hurt, fury, forgiveness, and anger. And when I'm feeling well, I fear that by demonstrating to my wife that she can get away with this once more, I'm coming across as a softie. In January, there will be more travel and I'm not sure how to handle it. Anyway, my wife and I have had some really in-depth and candid conversations about intimacy, desire, and our shared goals as a result of this occurrence. I began by attempting to ascertain what she was looking for or what she believed was lacking in her life, and whether there was anything we could do jointly to infuse our marriage with some excitement or a sense of freshness without the secret and betrayal. Although she has stated that she would be okay with me having someone at work with whom I could joke and perhaps share a kiss, we aren't specifically discussing getting married. I'm not sure. I find it strange at the moment. Is she letting me off the hook, or maybe implying that she wants an open marriage but isn't ready to come clean with either me or herself? Right now, divorce is not an option, and I understand that an open marriage with some form of boundary isn't the ideal way to handle this kind of situation. I also understand that this shouldn't even be talked or taken into consideration until the marriage is genuinely strong. I appreciate you reading my jumbled ideas. We would appreciate your opinion. Here are a few more remarks. Since they had sex and most likely had a full-fledged affair for much longer than that trip, she is giving you a pass. Marriages that are open due to adultery are doomed. You must advocate for yourself and establish clear guidelines for how healing should proceed. There is almost no possibility that this is merely a romantic relationship with some kissing. Don't fool yourself. Even when you're on a business trip, you can't have a month-long romance as adults and not sleep together. Her being ill is just as plausible as other cheats claiming that they recognized what was happening just before they had sex, that the guy couldn't get it up, etc. She's sugarcoating the reality and giving you only the most basic information. You're clearly simply too involved to see it. That's most likely the reason she's advocating for an open relationship. She most likely feels bad and believes that this will make her betrayal less severe. Staying together makes leaving easier. Keep things closed. It's almost as awful as saving the marriage by having a child. You will gain more self-confidence, of course, but the issue was never about other ladies. It's her. 10 minutes later, she eventually confessed to making out with him in her room after getting wasted at the hotel bar. I questioned her directly whether there had been any sexual activity or if she had slept with him. The answer was emphatically no. She continued by telling me that there was just prolonged kissing while seated in a chair, no sexual contact, no hands-up shirts, no exposed parts, no feeling up, and no erections felt. According to his supervisor, teenagers kiss adults screw, especially when the serial cheater has had several affairs with the relationship, and he will be content with just kissing. Very unlikely. I would wager actual money. There is still a trickle of truth. Although we aren't discussing getting married right now, she has stated that she would be okay with me having someone at work. I could joke around and maybe even share a kiss. I'm not sure. I find it strange at the moment. Is she letting me off the hook or maybe implying that she wants an open marriage but isn't ready to come clean with either me or herself? She is expressing her hope that you would accept her offer to absolve her of her guilt for having previously done so. It also gives me further proof that they had sex. To determine how frequently they spoke and texted, look through your cell phone logs. You will not get material, but such records cannot be erased or falsified. If it's not far higher than she's acknowledging, I'd be shocked. The third story. Does my refusal to assist my wife's relatives make me a jerk? I am 34 years old and married to my wife, Jessica, 33. Together we have 2 kids, Robin, who is 7 years old, and Theo, who is 5 years old. I had no family when I was a child. My biological mother would occasionally take me back, but she would always lose custody or place me back, so I was a foster child who was moved about a lot. When she gave up trying at last. Most people who wanted newborns or very little children didn't want me because I was 11 years old. Without getting adopted or finding a home, I grew out of the system. I had thought that Jessica's family would embrace me when we first met, but that was not the case. But I didn't figure it out for years. They despise me. They don't make it very clear, but I can tell by the way they treat me differently than they do the other sons and daughters-in-law. For example, asking them about their plans for Christmas while claiming that they didn't expect us to do anything else because I don't have a family, or inquiring about their jobs and advancements, but never me, and then seeming very surprised. Jessica and I both brought up my promotion. Michelle once told foster kid who had received a college scholarship, and the story made the local papers. The entire family's response was, "Wow, it's so surprising that a foster child made it to college." Jessica also said that I attended college. I overheard 2 of her siblings whispering something about Jessica in that narrative, and they appeared a bit uneasy. They probably think she lied about where we met then. They don't try to celebrate my birthday. They assume I don't spend time with my children. They believe that whatever I try to achieve is for Jessica, and when I claim it's not, don't believe me. But because I'm good at such things, they always want me to help with household maintenance or putting things together. At least twice, I have assisted Jessica's parents and all of her siblings. With the aid of therapy, I came to the realization that they didn't like me at all and appeared to devalue me because I was a foster child. I didn't do that for them. I did it for Jessica. However, Jessica's parents experienced problems with the stairs a few weeks ago. I went to make them better. I had to go buy additional supplies after spending hours working on one section. The whole thing was involved. Jessica's parents prepared lunch for some of the family members that visited while I was there, but nothing for me. They said they didn't believe I would want to eat when I inquired if there was any for me, after putting in hours of hard labor without eating in between. They didn't think that, I informed them. After I put in all that effort for them, they just didn't want to be courteous and offer me lunch. Jessica's mom and siblings called me out. Jessica and a few of the sibling spouses supported me, but I was reprimanded for failing to assist one of Jessica's sisters in repairing a bookcase, and for declaring that I would never again assist any of them. Family helps family, they claimed. When they ever treat me like family, I ask them, am I the jerk? Story 6. Friend had an affair with my wife after I inherited a fortune, is the title of this tale. They now wish to get back together. Hello, everyone. Wonderful news. I have added even more Reddit tales to my new channel. This time, we have some fantastic stories planned, a new voice, and shorter videos. Listen to this video, and if you enjoy it, visit the new channel by clicking the link in the description. Tell me your thoughts. Let's get to the story. It begins by saying, here's the thing then. I'm 32M and my wife is 30F. We arranged this camping vacation with a few of our pals. Not very fancy. Simply spending a few days in the woods to disconnect, toast marshmallows, share silly stories around the fire, and so forth. It, as always rather relaxed since we've been going on these excursions with these buddies for years. They're almost like family to us, because she and I have been together since our first year of college. In any case, the trip was good. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. We joked, drank, and barbecued. We had one of the nicest weekends in a long time. To be honest, however, something happened on the final morning that caught me off guard. Even though it was only a fleeting moment, it has been replaying itself in my mind ever since. Like a jumbled scenario that you can't stop thinking about. I thought we were all packed up. Half awake and attempting to go without leaving anything behind, everyone is sort of dragging their belongings back to the cars. I happened to look at my wife and one of our friends as I was packing our car. I could see what was happening even though they weren't very close, maybe 10 or 15 feet, but close enough. In that instant, he reached out and grabbed her hip before letting his hand slip down to her butt as she knelt to pick something up. And she didn't lose her temper, push him away, or do anything else. She simply gave him a grin, like it was some sort of inside joke. Perhaps a second or two, but long enough to have my stomach turn over. I was just standing there looking without even realizing it. Nothing was making sense to my head as it tried to process what I had just witnessed. I glanced around to see whether anyone else had seen, but nobody had. Each person was immersed in their own universe. The other couple was already making their way back toward the parking lot, talking about the journey home as his wife was busy packing up their car. There I stood, motionless, mentally reliving the scenario, attempting to determine whether or not I had dreamed it. However, it was genuine. I can't get it out of my head. To put it mildly, the journey home was strange. My wife made an effort to strike up a conversation, saying things like how wonderful the vacation was and how much fun we all had. But I was distracted. Despite my best efforts to remain composed, my thoughts kept returning to what I had witnessed. She even questioned why I was so silent at one point. She appeared satisfied when I muttered something about work, but I could see she was watching me closely because she sensed something wasn't right. I simply didn't want to discuss it while driving. What could I possibly say? Hey, what was the reason for our friend touching you all over, and she would simply ignore it? Let's say I was seeing visions. Tell me I'm suspicious. I simply felt strange when we arrived home. It can't be expressed any other way. I was going through the motions without really being there, like if I were on autopilot. The entire day passed quickly. I kept noticing myself nodding off, simply gazing off into space, trying to figure out what had happened at the campsite. And each time, I had the same instinct that something wasn't quite right. I didn't get much sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the picture of him caressing her and her grinning at him as I was laying in bed beside her. I felt as though there was an unpleasant knot in my gut that would not go away. Perhaps I had overreacted, I kept telling myself. My instinct told me there was more to it, but perhaps it was simply a friendly thing. You know, I've always trusted her. After more than 10 years of dating, I never once imagined she would give me cause to question her. She has always been my dearest buddy and my lifelong companion. However, there was a small fissure in that trust for the first time, and I was unsure of how to handle it. I couldn't help but notice this new aspect of her that seemed to be staring me in the face, notwithstanding my desire to do so. I got up the following morning, went about my daily business, and went to work, but I had the uneasy feeling that I was observing myself from a distance. It all felt wrong. I couldn't get rid of that instinct, and each time I attempted to suppress it, it returned with more vigor. The fact that I didn't know what to do was the worst part. Should I go up to her? Should I ignore it and hope it disappears? I didn't want to come out as a neurotic person who was making snap judgments, but I also didn't want to be the idiot who ignored something so clear by lunch. I couldn't even concentrate on my work since I was so distracted. I continued reliving that awful moment, dissecting every tiny detail in search of any explanation or explanation. Perhaps it was an isolated incident, a moment of bad judgment or something. However, the more I considered it, the less plausible that explanation seemed. Why did she feel so at ease with him caressing her in that way? And when she caught me gazing, why didn't she appear ashamed or guilty? She didn't even look in my direction. She simply gave him a grin as if nothing had happened. I continued to move back and forth, trying to tell myself it was nothing, but the knot in my gut persisted. I knew I couldn't continue like this. It was terminating me. I had to do something, anything, to calm my thoughts, slowly but definitely. However, I was still unaware of what it was. I was worn out both physically and psychologically by the time I arrived home. My wife pretended that everything was perfect and completely normal, and I tried my best to follow suit. In my heart, I knew that something was amiss, but I felt as though I was hiding it behind a mask. Worst of all, she failed to detect anything. She asked me about my day and talked about hers as she went about her evening as normal, and I simply nodded in agreement while responding with a single word. The knot in my gut was much worse that night as I lay in bed once again. I repeatedly rolled over in an attempt to settle in, but to no avail. There was silence in the house, and the only sound I could hear was my own thoughts becoming louder and louder until I couldn't ignore them. Despite my best efforts to ignore it, the thought of her and him at the campground persisted. I knew then and there that I had to discover the truth, no matter the consequences. So I was feeling a little nervous after that excursion. I kept the entire exchange between our buddy and my wife in the back of my mind, playing it over and over again, but I was still unable to bring it up to her. Though I wasn't sure how to acquire it without making things strange, I knew I needed some sort of response to help me think. The chance just fell into my lap at that moment. I was working from home one morning and attempting to resume my regular schedule. When I saw her iPad laying there, I was at the kitchen counter getting a quick cup of coffee before diving into some emails. Ordinarily, I wouldn't have given it much thought. She seldom ever uses the device, which has been available for ages. But I'm not sure this time. It simply clicked. Before I could convince myself otherwise, I picked up the gut sensation from the campground that had been bothering me for a while. The weird part comes next. Not even a password had been applied by her. She normally takes great care of her technology. For example, her phone is locked down with a lengthy code that I don't even know. However, I felt bad about simply holding the iPad throughout the open season. On the other hand, I reasoned that I would feel relieved if there was nothing to conceal, and I'll be aware if something is present. I opened it after taking a big breath. Her Telegram app was open and synchronized with her phone, which was the first thing I saw. It was there, staring at me as if the cosmos were asking me to look, even though I had no intention of delving into anything in particular. Despite my hot, trembling palms, I opened the app. It's strange, but I had the feeling that I would always regret not looking my best. At that point, it struck me like a freight train. The black and white communications from our acquaintance from months ago were all there. It was really mild at start, simply talking about unrelated topics like scheduling a get-together and the customary inside jokes. But the more I scrolled, the worse it became. Much worse. They talked about meeting up alone and said things like, "I've missed you so much and I can't wait to see you." It was all too much, and I had to pause and take a breath after feeling this strange cold go down my spine. Half of me continued scrolling in the hopes of finding some sort of explanation, as if I may be misinterpreting everything. But there it was, explained to me in a few provocative pictures, flirtatious texts, and plain, painful words. At some time in the future, they even intended to formally become partners. I was most affected by that section. It was more than a casual flirtation. The worst part was that they were discussing making it a reality. All of this had been taking place just in front of me. It seemed as though I was suddenly struck with a mixture of astonishment, despair, and rage. I was incensed, embarrassed, and felt deceived, but I told myself I had to know everything, so I made myself keep scrolling. In order to avoid being caught off guard later, I needed the whole picture. So I continued, using my phone to take screenshots in case something happened. I was unsure of how to remove the texts off the iPad without her noticing, and I didn't want to lose any of this. I have no idea why, but I felt as though I was not myself at that very time, as if I were witnessing the entire event unfold for someone else. In between these flirtatious, private conversations with him, I read notes about her daily life and our existence together. While I was busy telling them these small jokes about things I had never heard of, like, "Remember the lake and can't wait for the next time," they would discuss getting together. It seemed as though I was witnessing a different side of her that she was keeping hidden from me. Then I saw one of her messages, which was the final straw for me. "I'll make it work," or something like that. "All I need is a bit more time." She was discussing me and how she needed to control me in order to protect her secrets until they were ready. My own wife was controlling me, lying to me every day and pretending everything was good while she planned her future with him. I served as a stand-in till she and him worked things out. I grabbed every piece of evidence I would require by taking as many screenshots as I could. I kept telling myself that I had to do it correctly if I was going to face her. Just the whole story in the open, without any speculation or partial truths. All I knew was that I needed to be clever about this. I wasn't going to let her deceive me or seem like I was being controlling or paranoid. According to her, the evidence was right here, and I was going to make sure she couldn't get away with it. I felt exhausted and numb when I eventually put down the iPad. I always imagined that I would be furious if something like ever occurred. However, it was not the case. My entire life seemed to have been turned upside down. After spending so many years with this individual, I discovered that she was essentially a stranger to me in a matter of minutes. Now, every time and memory we had together seemed contaminated, as if it were all a part of a huge deception. I sat there looking at the wall for a long time, unsure of what to do. A part of me knew I couldn't just go crazy, but I still wanted to storm into the next room and face her, telling her I knew everything. With all we had in common, our flat, our money, and most significantly, my parents' inheritance. I had to take extra precautions to keep myself safe. They had left me that gift, and I was not going to allow her to use it after this. I returned the iPad to its original location. As if nothing had occurred. It was difficult, even though I knew I would need some time to decide how to go and organize everything before dropping the hammer. Each second that went by, it made my stomach turn every time she spoke to me as if nothing were wrong. Even though I was struggling to retain my composure, I realized I had to continue to play along, at least until I found out how to approach her. The proper manner. I am currently sitting on this mountain of evidence there. Trying to find out what to do next turned my entire life upside down. I'm trying to find every last bit of evidence about the lady I thought I knew better than anybody. But I'm not even sure what to trust anymore. I never imagined I'd be in this situation. All I know is that from now on, nothing will be the same. I felt as though I was in an other universe after looking through her iPad and discovering all those texts. I always assumed that if something like this were happening, I would know. Given how long we've been dating, I assumed I'd notice if things started to go south. However, I was sitting on evidence that my wife and my alleged buddy had been scheming behind my back for an unknown amount of time, and I was at a loss for what to do next. But I was certain of one thing. Without a strategy, I wasn't going to blow it all up. I couldn't simply storm into the living room and yell, Absolutely not. She would just accuse me of fabricating it, claim it was merely polite conversation, or make some other reason. Given that we shared an apartment, money, and everything else, I needed everything set up first. I didn't want to have my life shattered and then suffer legal repercussions as well. I took a seat, inhaled deeply, and began considering every possibility. I had to first choose what I wanted. Sure, confront her, but what comes next? Divorce wasn't an easy choice, and I didn't want to remain married to someone who was unfaithful. We had a lot in common, and to be honest, I wasn't going to let her get away with ruining my life in this way. She had always understood the significance of the inheritance my parents had left me. After all, After everything she had done, I couldn't let her have that, so I spent the remainder of the day attempting to gather my thoughts and maintain composure. She asked me about my day and joked about as if nothing was happening, acting as though everything was okay on the surface. Until I was prepared to strike her with everything, I was considering every possible strategy to keep her totally in the dark. She would begin hiding her identity, erasing messages, lying to get out of it, or even attempting to portray me as crazy if she had any suspicions. She was that good at acting. I hardly slept at all that night. The weight of everything was bearing down on me as I lay there, unsure of where to begin. I informed my manager that I had a personal emergency and phoned in ill to work the following morning. I needed a day to straighten up my facts and make sense of everything, but I had no idea how long this would take. Find a lawyer as a first step. Although I was ignorant of the divorce procedure, I reasoned that I should see a professional for legal guidance. I began by searching Google for area lawyers with positive reviews and compiling a list of contacts. I then called a couple of numbers. I made an effort to remain composed, but every call made my heart race. I was fortunate to find a doctor who had a cancellation and could see me that afternoon, since most others had wait periods of a week or longer. I accepted it without question. It was a terrible wait till the appointment. I paced the house, afraid she might notice. I managed to take screenshots of every single thing on the iPad and meticulously saved them all to a backup that I had hidden in my work email. All of the evidence I had discovered, including the images and the messages. In case things at the lawyer's office became nasty, I wanted to make sure I had all the documentation I required. Despite my best efforts to remain composed, it was obvious that the man had experience with this type of situation. He just nodded and gave me space to rant before probing me with pertinent questions and laying down the procedure in detail. He seemed to have done this many times, which, let's face it, he most likely did. He guided me through the whole process of safeguarding my assets, obtaining proof, and preventing her from accessing my inheritance. I remember him saying something that remained with me, and he even warned me about other techniques you may use once she realized. You shouldn't expect her to suddenly act fair if she has been keeping things from you this competently. I know he was correct, so it really got to me. My wife had previously shown that she was capable of lying to me directly and without hesitation, and she would likely stop at nothing to get my approval if she were prepared to cheat on me and continue for months. After the meeting, I felt like I had a clearer idea of what I needed to accomplish first whenever things got real. I had to maintain the appearance of normalcy until I was completely prepared. No indication that I knew who she was. My schedule hasn't changed significantly. Simply comply. Pretend nothing went wrong. I knew that was the only way to get through this without her noticing, even though it seemed like the most false thing I had ever done. I maintained my composure for the course of the following several days, mainly hiding out in my home office and seeming to be preoccupied with work. But it was difficult to be normal every time I saw her. After more than 10 years of living with this lady, I'm now following her every move as if she were a stranger I can't trust. Every time she tried to pull me in for an embrace, joked, or chatted to me about her day, it seemed like another stab in the back. I had to tell myself to be calm and to focus on the goal. It all came down to waiting for the day when I could face her and knew I was protected. To make sure everything was safe, I moved some of my money about in secret for the remainder of that week. I wasn't taking any chances since I wasn't sure how she would respond after I told her everything. I kept telling myself that I was only defending what was rightly mine, even though it felt strange and like I was doing something wrong. Even while I wouldn't anticipate her going so far as to attempt to interfere with my money, I couldn't rule anything out at this point. I had planned everything I could think of before the end of the week. The attorney was prepared, my evidence was secure, and my money was safeguarded. Even though I was still unsure of how I would approach her, at least I felt protected. To the extent that I could, I was in charge of the circumstance. Even yet, it seemed like I was losing a small part of myself every night when I went to bed with her and pretended nothing was wrong. I couldn't get rid of the knot in my gut and the ongoing stress. I desperately wanted to just finish it and make everything public. However, I was aware that patience was essential and that I would have to wait until everything was just right. The hardest thing was that, simply waiting. Restraining myself even though my gut told me to address her immediately. I kept telling myself that she would eventually know everything and have no escape route, even though it felt like agony. I was finally prepared to face her after a week of being cautious. I had all my legal ducks in a row, having read over every message and piece of evidence I had kept. When I eventually brought this up, my lawyer had warned me to watch what I said, keep things straightforward and just get her to acknowledge it. In light of it, I prepared the discussion. According to what I'd read, she was most likely with him since she had gone to her sister's house to assist with the kids. On a Sunday night, she returned beaming, remarking on how much fun it was to spend time with family and how adorable her sister's children were. I simply nodded in agreement, maintaining a straight face as she continued. But I believe I even forced a small smile. It was really phony. She definitely sensed that I was unique when I informed her that we needed to have a serious conversation. Despite her slightly worried expression, she nodded. We then took a seat in the living room. I had been rehearsing my words, trying to appear cool and collected, but it was much more difficult than I had anticipated when I was really facing her. I wanted to shout, rage, and tell her how deeply she had wounded me. However, I inhaled and told myself to contain myself. I began by inquiring as to whether she was content with our marriage. She gave me a startled look and nodded. Of course, yes. Why wouldn't I be? I asked her whether she had ever cheated on me after simply staring at her . She blinks as if that question had just sprung out of nowhere. To me, it was like a lighting sign. Yet there was a fleeting flicker in her gaze, a little hesitation that would have been harmless to others. She immediately replied that she would never do such a thing, and then she questioned why I was even bringing it up. I looked into her eyes and pressed a little closer. She became defensive when I questioned if she was truly certain. She began, "I don't understand why you're asking me this." And then, as if it were all a great joke, she added a small chuckle, as if I were the strange one for asking. I could see her becoming uneasy, perhaps wondering whether I had worked things out or how much I knew . After letting her babble for a while, I stopped talking. "You've been seeing him, I know that. I only stated that." However, it was sufficient. She simply gazed at me for a moment as her face turned pale. She appeared to be speechless, as if she was at a loss for words. Then, as I had anticipated, she began to dispute it, claiming that I must have misinterpreted it to mean that nothing was happening. I was prepared for this. I informed her directly that I had seen all of the photographs, all of the communications. She sat there in quiet for what seemed like forever, and I could tell that her mind was racing, likely trying to think of some way to justify or deceive her, but I simply stared at her, refusing to let her off the hook, and waited for her to ultimately confess. She finally broke down and confessed to kissing a guy on a night out with pals months prior. She stated she instantly regretted it and that it was just a dumb error. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said again. It had no significance. Despite the fact that her account was quite different from what I had read, I remained silent. As I waited for her to go further, I asked her if that was all she wanted to say, and if she had any further questions. She remained true to her account, adamantly stating that it was only that one instance of a pointless, foolish kiss. She even broke down in tears as she expressed her want to avoid losing me due to a mistake. I couldn't help but chuckle. It was a pitiful, depressing laugh. However, I was unable to keep it here. As if she had just done a quick flip, she was seated in front of me. I looked her in the eye and told her that I knew everything after reading months' worth of texts between her and this guy. "I've witnessed everything. Drop the act, then." She eventually stopped talking at that point. She must have realized there was no way out as she glanced down. I quote, "D seen enough." but I could see the wheels moving in her mind as she tried to decide what to do next. I got up and gave her my lawyer's card, which I had taken from my pocket. I informed her that I had filed for divorce and that she may speak to my lawyer if she wanted to talk to me going forward. She became irate at that point, instead then apologizing. She immediately tried to turn everything against me by gaslighting me. She said that I was overreacting and that I was discarding everything for a single error. She even had the audacity to accuse me of being emotional and of creating a big issue out of nothing. She then broke down in tears, accusing me of attempting to drive her away and overanalyzing everything. I said nothing at all. I simply watched her go through each excuse one after the other until hitting me with the lowest one yet. You have no one else in the world. If you just had one family remaining, why would you leave them? Given how much I relied on her following the death of my parents, she flung that phrase at me as if she knew it would touch home. It felt like a kick to the belly to hear her say that. I had confided in her completely, even sharing with her how isolated I had felt following the death of my parents. And here she was, preventing me from going in some perverse manner. At that point, I believe I was certain there was nothing left to preserve. I didn't scream or shout. I just informed her that I was finished and that there was no turning back. I picked up a few items, packed them in a bag, and left. She continued to cry as she told me that I was wasting 10 years of our time together and that I was making a grave error. I simply continued to walk. I was unable to remain there. One more minute. I climbed into my car and sat there for a minute, absorbing everything. It was this. The lady I believed I would be with for the rest of my life had betrayed, deceived, and then attempted to take advantage of my sadness. For the first time in weeks, I felt as though I was finally seeing things properly, as if I had just woken up from a nightmare. She was left to consider everything while I drove away. Although I was unsure of what would happen next, I was certain that I was done with her. She had attempted to influence me and played her games, but I wasn't buying it. No more. Update 1. Since I thought it was the only way I could find out what she was doing, I took her iPad with me when I left that evening, without her being aware of it. Maybe she would continue contacting him if she felt she still had the advantage, but I wanted to stay one step ahead. It proved to be a wise decision since the information I discovered in those mails provided me with all the clarification I required. After I left, I immediately contacted his wife, the friend's wife, who was unaware of the situation. I contacted her, told her everything, and gave her all of my documentation, including the texts and pictures. She was enraged. She first didn't believe it, but after reading what I had shown her, she started crying. She stated she needed time to take it all in and thanked me for informing her. However, we were both aware that this was not the end of it. I lived in a motel for the following 2 days, checked in with my lawyer, and took care of all I needed to do. I continued to read the messages on the iPad in the interim, eager to see what they would say next and what I would discover. In one of the chats, she informed him, well, at least I'll get a huge share of his parents' inheritance and that they could use it to start over somewhere new. Let's just say that it made me pleased I had brought that iPad with me. She brought up the sum of $1.5 million that my parents had left me when they died. I wanted to preserve it for something special, and she understood precisely what it meant to me, perhaps for investments or our future family. But in her mind, he or she was already spending it with him. That particular message and statement felt like a kick to the belly. She was planning a future with him while plotting to embezzle my parents' money, and I couldn't believe she had gone that far. Though callous, she was already considering it theirs. I then scheduled a follow-up appointment with my attorney. I informed him of all I had observed and that she was attempting to take advantage of my wealth, but he told me that she couldn't really touch that money because of some legal measures my parents had put in place. Evidently, they had foreseen such circumstances, and as long as I maintained it apart from our joint money, it was legally protected. I was relieved when he informed me that the substantial inheritance was the final remnant of my parents that I would not allow her to take away. I continued to read the iPad messages throughout the course of the next week, and sure enough, things took a different direction. Her attorney must have informed her that she was unable to access the inheritance because she and my alleged buddy were suddenly rushing about discussing a backup plan. I witnessed her telling him that they would need to find another solution and that perhaps it would be better for her to get back together with me for the time being. "Perhaps I should try to get him back on my side, at least for the time being," she said. Naturally, he concurred. They reasoned that she might still be able to obtain a financial gain or anything else from me in the divorce if she played nice. Seeing her change gears that quickly made me nauseous, she moved from arranging a new life with him using my inheritance to arranging a fictitious reconciliation with me in order to take advantage of the circumstance. This time, I was seeing the lines before she delivered them, so it was like to seeing someone perform a part. She began contacting me at the exact moment, sending me lengthy texts, urging us to speak and expressing her desire to resolve the matter. She would reminisce about the past, say things like, "I love you," and "We shouldn't let one mistake ruin everything we've worked so hard to achieve." It seemed like she believed that by saying a few kind words to me, she could take away what I had witnessed. I ignored her calls, though, since I didn't believe it. I would always respond to her messages by saying, "Contact my lawyer." I didn't intend to give her any hope that I was falling for it since I knew she was only carrying out her new plan with him. She persisted in pressing, so I totally blocked her. Her falsehoods were the last thing I wanted to hear. I basically concentrated on being quiet for a few months. I left everything to the attorneys. I continued to work, save money, and prepare to go. Although I knew she was receiving information from the attorneys, I didn't hear anything from her after blocking her. Her attempts at reconciliation were short-lived. I suppose she eventually understood that I wasn't going to play her game when she saw that I wasn't going to back down. After several months, the divorce was finally formalized. My attorney ensured that my inheritance was secure and undamaged, allowing me to maintain all I had worked so hard to save. Despite the chaotic apartment scenario, I was able to sell it and go on without her. It wasn't simple. It was more effort than I had anticipated, but it was worthwhile to untangle our lives after all these years. She was no longer a concern for me. I gave my experience a lot of thought, and to be honest, I'm simply relieved it's gone. In order to flee with a man who posed as my friend, she attempted to steal everything from me, including the memories of my parents' sacrifice and legacy. I suppose that's who she truly was all along, but it's a perverse form of betrayal. I'm now concentrating on my future, the one that is truly mine, free of deception. At least I'm not subject to any of her plans, but I still have a ways to go. I can start over for the first time in a long time, and for now, that's plenty.